Chapter 1758 Girl in White 4? Chapter 1758 Girl in White 4. The Ghost King was indeed very capable. That move alone was enough to intimidate Seven. Seeing that things were going south, Seven immediately activated the death wall. But to his surprise, when the girl saw the wall, she only smirked. With a wave of her fair hand, there was a hole in the death wall, as if it was made of paper. She did it so effortlessly. Seven stared at her in disbelief, and was astonished. Feng Wu's eyes widened as well. She had no idea that the girl in white could be so terrifying. Meanwhile, Basie's eyes lit up when he noticed this. Interesting. The White Fairy, one of the three kings of the land of the spirit source, was helping that girl. As far as he knew, the White Fairy was very hard to please, and she was much older than she appeared to be. Basie didn't look at the White Fairy. Instead, he kept his gaze on Feng Wu. He wondered what the girl had done to deserve the fairy's favor. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. Meanwhile, in the cave, Seven and the White Fairy were exchanging blows. Thump, thump, thump. Both were exceptionally capable. Strictly speaking, Seven was the inferior one, but because the White Fairy had only just woken up from the coffin, she hadn't recovered her full power yet. Thump, thump, thump. Seven flew backwards after he took several hits, and smashed into the wall. Feng Wu's eyes lit up. She knew that Seven was bound to lose this time, so she was studying the girl in white rather than the captain. The girl stepped on Seven's chest and smirked. "Give it to me." Cough. "What are you talking about?" Seven spat out a mouthful of blood and stared at the girl. The White Fairy had an eerie look in her eyes. Suddenly she stuck out her tongue. Her red tongue immediately wrapped around Seven's neck, almost choking him. "If you won't give it up, I'll take it myself." Her serrated tongue suddenly moved, and there was a tearing sound. Seven's chest was ripped open. Blood gushed out, painting the entire wall red. Feng Wu stepped back and narrowed her eyes. This girl. After Seven's chest was torn open, a streak of black smoke slowly rose out of his body. The black smoke then took shape, turning into a human form before it landed on the ground. "Master." The figure then stood in front of the White Fairy and bowed at her. Seven stared at the girl. You. The fairy snorted. "How dare you steal my new and confine him?" Seven was filled with despair. He had no idea that things would turn out like this. Indeed, had it not been for the land of the spirit source, he wouldn't have made such rapid progress. Last time, when the land of the spirit source appeared, he happened to catch an old ghost. Chapter 1759 Girl in White 5. Chapter 1759 Girl in White 5. To refine that ghost he had to go through hell, and he almost hadn't made it. With much difficulty, he had been able to wake up again. "If he's your servant, who are you?" Seven put a hand over his chest where blood was gushing out. He stared at her, and had a bad feeling. The White Fairy snorted. "I'm the White Butterfly." The White Butterfly. Hearing that name, Seven felt as if a thunderclap had just exploded over his head. "You're the White Butterfly, one of the three kings of the land of the spirit source?" Seven spat out mouthfuls of blood as he coughed. "I didn't expect that people would still remember my name after my long slumber." "I like you," the White Butterfly told Seven. Seven knew that if he didn't say something he would die. "I know Master Teacher Basie. I'm his indirect pupil." Seven cried out. The White Fairy stared at Seven. "It's true. I really am. I'm telling the truth. Since you know my name, I won't kill you. You can go." The White Fairy ignored Seven after that. Feng Wu's eyes widened. "Master Teacher Basie." The White Fairy spared his life just because he knew that man. Was that Master Teacher really so terrifying? Meanwhile, the White Fairy turned her gaze on Feng Wu. "You." The White Fairy casually crooked a finger at her. "Come here." Feng Wu's stomach lurched. At the same time, a few thousand kilometers away, Master Teacher Basie also looked surprised. Even Basie himself didn't realize that his mood had changed drastically in the past few minutes, although he had always been able to remain unperturbed. Being a clever girl, Feng Wu immediately ran to the white fairy. The white fairy stared at Feng Wu with her cold, brooding eyes. Your name? Feng Wu. Feng Wu grinned. The white fairy narrowed her eyes. Feng Wu? Why do I feel that I've heard that name before? Tilting her head, the white fairy tried to recall, but her head was simply too muddled. Feng Wu was on edge. This white fairy was so terrifying. Seven was a spiritual lord, but she handled him as if he was a monkey. Feng Wu knew that she couldn't afford to offend this fairy. Give it to me. She stretched out an open palm to Feng Wu. Feng Wu bit her lower lip and hesitated. Should she give in or stick to her principles? The white fairy stared at Feng Wu with a threatening look in her eyes. Feng Wu asked, do I have to? The white fairy stared at Fairy and smirked. Before she could say anything, the ghost known as Nu snorted. How dare you? Do you know the consequence of disobeying the fairy? Feng Wu asked. What would that be? Before Nu could answer, the white fairy silenced him with a wave of her hand. So, are you going to go back on your word? You made a promise. The white fairy stared at Feng Wu with a half-smile on her face. Feng Wu stared at her. Our deal was that you would kill a person for me after I woke you up. But now that you're awake, not only didn't you help me with the killing, you're also forcing me to give you the seal. I won't stand for it. There was a murderous look in the white fairy's eyes when she stared at Feng Wu. How dare you defy me? Meanwhile, on a mountain peak less than 50 kilometers away, a teenager in black sat on the very top. With his legs crossed, he looked as tall and straight as a bamboo. He sat there facing the sun, and with his eyes closed. His fair hands were on his knees with the thumbs and middle fingers pressed together. Spiritual essence danced on his skin like tiny fairies. When he breathed in, the plants around him were covered in frost. When he breathed out, the plants immediately withered. Everything about this teenager suggested that he was unmatched. If Feng Wu were there, she would have blurted out his name. Jun Linyuan. Chapter 1760. Chapter 1760. Chu Fengxiao the third senior brother 1. The white fairy stared at Feng Wu and smiled coldly. Are you reasoning with me? Feng Wu said. So are you saying that you're not reasonable? The white fairy gave Feng Wu a sympathetic look and shook her head. With my advantage over you, I don't need to be reasonable. Don't you get it? Of course Feng Wu knew that. I thought you were different. Feng Wu frowned. The white fairy gave Feng Wu a half-smile. Why would you think that? Feng Wu blinked innocently. Because you're pretty. How can someone as good-looking as you be unreasonable? At first, the atmosphere had been so tense that a battle could start at any moment. Sapphiro clenched her fists in excitement outside the cave, and Seven was equally excited. But Seven wasn't what he used to be. Having lost his death wall, he was now greatly emaciated. Next to the white fairy, Nu stared at Feng Wu as if she was already dead. After all, the white fairy could kill Feng Wu as easily as snapping her fingers. At the same time, the white fairy kept her unblinking gaze on Feng Wu. Other people would have been scared to death by her gaze, but Feng Wu was still smiling. Are you saying that I'm pretty? The white fairy murmured. Feng Wu smiled. That's right. You're very pretty, especially your eyes. They're like snow lotus on an iceberg and bright stars in the night sky. They almost take my breath away. Feng Wu actually hadn't come up with these words herself. They were fed to her by Little Phoenix. Are you sure I can say that? Feng Wu asked Little Phoenix in her head. She had no idea why Little Phoenix told her to say those things, but the bird told her decisively that if she said them, she would be all right. Little Phoenix told her to keep an eye on the fairy's facial expression, and the bird was right. The white fairy was indeed deep in thought, and she seemed to be cherishing some pleasant old memory. Who and what was on her mind? Feng Wu knew that she needed to be very careful with what she said after that. One slip of her tongue, and she might be killed. Judging by the battle between the white fairy and Seven early, Feng Wu could tell that the white fairy was unfathomably capable. While the white fairy was lost in thought, Feng Wu took a step back, then another. If it was possible, she would like to run away from this cave. Seeing this, Nu reminded the white fairy, Master? Master? That immediately woke the white fairy up from her pleasant memory. Seeing the frown on her face, Feng Wu was alarmed. No, the fairy was going to lose her temper. As expected, the next second, the white fairy stared at Feng Wu with a murderous look in her eyes. Immediately, Feng Wu's heartbeat quickened, as if her heart was going to jump out of her throat. However, the next second, the white fairy turned her cold gaze on Nu. Smack! The white fairy smacked Nu on the head. Crack! Nu smashed into the wall and almost passed out. Chapter 1761. Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother, 2. Chapter 1761. Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother, 2. I didn't say you could talk. The white fairy was angry. Feng Wu sighed inwardly. That memory had to be very important to the white fairy. That was why she couldn't tolerate any disturbance, since it would ruin the atmosphere for her. Intimidated, Nu didn't dare to say another word. His eyes were filled with fear. But the white fairy was still angry. She then turned her emotionless gaze on Feng Wu and asked, "Who on earth are you? Why did you compliment my eyes?" Feng Wu urged Little Phoenix. "Hey, what do I say? How should I answer her?" But Little Phoenix had become very quiet. Why wouldn't the bird say anything? Her silence made the white fairy suspicious. The next second, she charged at Feng Wu and grabbed her by the neck, an infuriated look in her eyes. That look could burn one to ash. "Hey, you lousy bird, say something." Feng Wu grew anxious. But Little Phoenix didn't say a word, as if someone had stopped it. In fact, it wasn't that it didn't want to speak. It wanted to say something, but it just couldn't. The stress made it break into a sweat. Since Little Phoenix didn't say anything, Feng Wu had to make something up herself. "Ahem. Your eyes really are very pretty. Can't I even say that?" Feng Wu found it very difficult to speak. At the same time, Sapphiro and Seven looked at each other, and both gloated at Feng Wu's predicament. They were sure that Feng Wu was going to die this time. Sapphiro's tongue was almost recovered, so she gritted her teeth and said, "I knew it. There's no way that the white fairy would like Feng Wu. She's doomed this time." Seven nodded. Ever since he had been deprived of the death wall, Seven was full of rage toward this world. Meanwhile, in the cave, the white fairy choked Feng Wu and yelled angrily, "Speak. Who told you to say that? You've seen Chu Fengxiao, haven't you? Where is he? Tell me." Chu Fengxiao. Feng Wu was dumbfounded. She had never heard that name, so how could she have seen him before? "Chu Fengxiao? I've never." Suddenly Little Phoenix stopped her with a shriek. "You've seen Chu Fengxiao. Say it." Little Phoenix said anxiously. Feng Wu couldn't believe it. That lousy bird had been silent until now. Before Feng Wu could scold Little Phoenix, the white fairy tightened her grip. "Speak. You know Chu Fengxiao, don't you?" Feng Wu said in frustration, "Yes, alright, I've met Chu Fengxiao before." As soon as she said that, the white fairy trembled violently, as if the world had lit up. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. The malicious white fairy was terrifyingly capable, and she was unpredictable as well. However, she almost lost control when she heard Chu Fengxiao's name. Who on earth was this man? Who is Chu Fengxiao? Feng Wu asked Little Phoenix in confusion. Little Phoenix gave her a strange look. Chapter 1762. Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother, 3. Chapter 1762. Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother, 3. Feng Wu prompted the bird. "Hey, talk to me. Who's Chu Fengxiao?" Little Phoenix asked. "Are you sure you want to know?" Feng Wu said, "Yes. Just tell me." Little Phoenix said, "He's your senior brother." Feng Wu couldn't believe her ears. "What did you say? Who's senior brother?" Little Phoenix's voice rang out in her head. "Yours. He's your senior brother. He used to be your beautiful master's disciple." Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Little Phoenix said, "It's the truth. What you know is only a fraction of how powerful your beautiful master was." Feng Wu asked, "He's my senior brother? And the third one?" Little Phoenix nodded solemnly. Feng Wu said, "So, I have two other senior brothers." Tilting its head, Little Phoenix gave it some thought and said, "I suppose so." Feng Wu asked anxiously, "What do you mean by that?" Aren't you supposed to know everything? Little Phoenix sounded frustrated. Who told you that? Feng Wu said. If you know that Chu Fengxiao is my third senior brother, how can you not know who the other two are? Little Phoenix smacked its head and looked at Feng Wu in frustration. I have a memory problem, you know that. What I'm sure is that I must have known your two other senior brothers once, but I only have a fraction of those memories. So, I really have no idea who they are. Feng Wu asked, what about my third senior brother? Why did you suddenly remember him? And why didn't you tell me earlier? Little Phoenix looked at her in frustration. Feng Wu asked, why are you looking at me like that? Little Phoenix said woefully, it isn't that I was keeping it from you. I just didn't know who he was, let alone the name Chu Fengxiao. I only recalled that name because this white fairy who tried to kill you brought it up. Only then did it jog my memory. Both Feng Wu and Little Phoenix knew that its memory had been sealed. Ever since its last breakthrough, it was able to remember some important bits, but most of the time, it was still the same. Feng Wu said, fine, tell me about this Chu Fengxiao then. Who is he, and why is the white fairy so obsessed with him? Little Phoenix glanced at the white fairy and saw that she was lost in her memories again. So it lowered its voice and told Feng Wu, your third senior brother is a very impressive man. He's very capable. Feng Wu asked, how capable? Little Phoenix asked, do you know Feng Sun's father? Feng Wu said, of course I do. Lady Northern Feng is my godmother. The Northern Feng general is stationed on the northern border. He's considered the most capable man over there, with unfathomable strength. Even Emperor Wu reveres him sometime. Little Phoenix asked, do you know Master Teacher Si Baisi then? Feng Wu said, Master Teacher Si Baisi is said to be the most capable man on the Sino grassland. He has never been defeated in his life. He also has very high standards. The rumor is that he still has no disciple because he doesn't think that anyone is worthwhile. Little Phoenix nodded and said, your third senior brother once saved Northern Feng General from thousands of enemies. Feng Wu said, that impressive. He saved Northern Feng General? Is he as capable as he is then? Chapter 1763, Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother 4. Chapter 1763, Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother 4. Little Phoenix neither nodded nor shook its head. It went on. He also killed the previous chieftain Sino, and made his way through an army of thousands. Back then, the chieftain was protected by Master Teacher Si Baisi. Feng Wu's eyes sparkled. Wow, my third senior brother is so impressive. He was able to kill the chieftain, even when Master Teacher Si Baisi was protecting him. He has to be as powerful as the Master Teacher. Little Phoenix nodded. Feng Wu asked, then what? Tell me, where is my third senior brother now? With such an impressive third senior brother around, no one would dare to pick on her again, thought Feng Wu. Scratching its head, Little Phoenix looked at Feng Wu guiltily. That's all I can remember. Feng Wu said, you lousy bird. I'm so mad at you. Humph. Little Phoenix grumbled. Just then, the white fairy returned to herself and stared at Fairy. Speak. How do you know Chu Fengxiao? Who is he to you? The white fairy tightened her grip with a jealous look in her eyes. Feng Wu was already having trouble breathing, and she was almost suffocating now. She was amazed by how strong the fairy was. She had to speed up her cultivation to strengthen herself. However, her top priority was to get out of this mess. Feng Wu decided that the white fairy had to have a history with her third senior brother. Judging by her obsession, she had to like the man. As for if he liked her back, Feng Wu had no idea. She said, how am I going to tell you if you don't let me go? Master Teacher Si Baisi had lost interest in Feng Wu. He decided that the girl was only lucky and had a glib tongue. He thought it was time to look away. However, before he could do that, the name Chu Fengxiao came up. Chu Fengxiao. How could Master Teacher Si Baisi forget that name? He was the only swordsman who had ever defeated Si Baisi. Therefore, he shifted his attention to the white fairy. She stared at Feng Wu and said, speak, or I'll throttle you right now. The white fairy let go of Feng Wu. Cough. Feng Wu coughed for a while before she could breathe normally again. She then said, Chu Fengxiao. I met him before, when I was very little. She chose her words carefully. She knew how terrifying a jealous woman could be. The white fairy showed so much emotion toward the name Chu Fengxiao. So Fengwu had to avoid being seen as a competitor. Therefore, the mention of her childhood would be the safest. It was when I was 8, no 7. Fengwu had a solemn look on her face. Indeed, the white fairy seemed less angry. Bingo! Resting against the wall, Fengwu readjusted her spiritual essence as she made up her story. The uncle was injured. He had a beard, dirty hair, and a scar on his face. No. The white fairy stared at Fairy. That couldn't have been Chu Fengxiao. You're mistaken. Fengwu said, I see. That uncle wasn't Chu Fengxiao. Chapter 1764. Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother, 5. Chapter 1764. Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother, 5. Fengwu wondered if she was off the hook now. The white fairy glared at Fengwu. I'll kill you if you haven't met him. Fengwu was speechless. Some women who had been emotionally injured were just unreasonable. This white fairy was like a goddess of revenge. Fengwu said, How am I supposed to prove that the uncle I knew was Chu Fengxiao? The white fairy tossed her a piece of charred wood. Draw. Fengwu was about to say something, when the white fairy threatened her. If your drawing doesn't convince me, I'll kill you. Fengwu didn't know what to say. She threw a dirty look at the white fairy, but had no choice but to do as she was told. Holding the stick like a pen, Fengwu stood in front of the wall, looking distressed. A short distance away, Sapphiro smirked. Fengwu, stop lying about knowing Chu Fengxiao. Do you even know who that is? I'd like to see you talk your way out of this. As a matter of fact, Fengwu really had no idea what Chu Fengxiao looked like. When she started drawing, she drew the bearded man with the scar that she described. The white fairy was displeased. Sapphiro was so glad that she almost laughed. But just then, Fengwu started a second drawing according to Little Phoenix's instructions. Chu Fengxiao has bigger eyes. Yes, fierce ones. And a prominent and handsome nose. Thin and well-defined lips. Fengwu finished both drawings in no time. She then turned to the white fairy and said, The first one is what Uncle Chu looked like when I first met him. The second one is how he looked after he recovered. He looked distressed in the first drawing, and exceptionally handsome in the second one. The white fairy stared at the second one, and looked infatuated. Her mind seemed to have wandered off somewhere. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she seemed to be in pain. When she raised her hand to caress the drawing, tears rolled down her cheeks, dampening her clothes. Fengxiao, my Fengxiao, why were you injured? Fengxiao, who did it? Who did this to you? The white fairy cried. She then waved her hands around, and became very emotional. A sinister wind blew, and the entire cave shook. It was terrifying. When the Ghost King got angry, a lot of people would die. It was true. Fengwu moved away from the white fairy to stay out of harm's way. She had drawn the injured Chu Fengxiao to convince the white fairy, as well as to bring out her sympathy. As expected, she had the white fairy under control. Fengwu was a little relieved and smiled inwardly. She thought, My dear third senior brother whom I've never met, I'm gonna use you as an excuse for now. When we actually meet, I'll make it up to you with some good wine. Meanwhile, the white fairy stared at the drawing for a very long time, before she turned her gaze on Fengwu. Speak. Fengwu looked perplexed. The white fairy asked, Why was he injured? Who did it? How did you meet him? How well did he recover? Where did he go afterward? No. Stop right there, said Fengwu. Chapter 1765. Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother, 6. Chapter 1765. Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother, 6. Fengwu raised a hand to stop the white fairy. How am I supposed to answer those questions all at once? Come over here so we can talk. Fengwu patted the spot next to her, where some dried grass lay. The white fairy frowned, and was about to lose her temper. This girl was so disrespectful. Fengwu said grumpily, Uncle Chu Fengxiao used to sit down by the wall, and tell me stories. He said he didn't like looking up at other people. Sister, are you not like that? The white fairy loved Chu Fengxiao to the bone. Hearing that, she immediately snorted. I'm not like that. Says who? After that, she walked up to Feng Wu and sat down against the wall. Both Si Basie in the distance and Seven and Sapphiro, just outside the cave, were utterly surprised. That was the terrifying Ghost King. One sweep of her sleeve, and Feng Wu could turn to ash. But when Feng Wu told her to sit down next to her, she did as she was told. And when they sat down, they started chatting. Suddenly, they didn't look like enemies anymore. This Feng Wu. Thousands of kilometers away, Master Teacher Si Basie looked surprised again. There was something indescribable about this girl. She seemed to have the ability to resolve the most intense conflict, and turned her worst enemy into her friend. No one else could do that. Master Teacher Si Basie had seen much of the world, but this was the first time he had ever seen someone like her. He was pleasantly surprised. Feng Wu had no idea that Master Teacher Si Basie was studying her. Right now, all her attention was on the white fairy. Speak, she urged Feng Wu. Feng Wu said, She made up the whole story. This was the first time she had heard about Chu Fengxiao, so of course she hadn't met him before. However, she was as good a storyteller as she was an actress. Therefore, she made up a story about a swordsman running into Feng Manor after he was injured and being saved by a 7-year-old girl, who then brought him food and water every day. The white fairy was interested in anything to do with Chu Fengxiao, and she hung on Feng Wu's every word. When Feng Wu finally finished the story she made up, the white fairy started asking questions again. Who injured him? Feng Wu shrugged. Auntie, I was only 7. How am I supposed to know that? The white fairy glared at Feng Wu. What did you just call me? Feng Wu said, I mean sister. Uncle Chu let me call him uncle. I'll call you sister, all right? The white fairy was a little appeased, and let the matter drop. If he was injured in the Zhenwu Empire, the culprit had to be from there. Once I destroy the Zhenwu Empire, I'll take revenge for him. Feng Wu's eyes widened. This white fairy was so. She didn't want to see such a disaster fall upon the people of the Zhenwu Empire, so she immediately said, Wait, I think Uncle Chu mentioned a surname. I wonder if it had anything to do with his enemy. What was it? Tell me. Chapter 1766, Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother 7. Chapter 1766, Chu Fengxiao the Third Senior Brother 7. Tilting her head, Feng Wu pretended to try to remember. I think he mentioned something about left or right. Uncle Chu Fengxiao talked about 9 major clans or something like that. They ambushed him. The white fairy glared at Feng Wu. Left or right? Are you an idiot? Left is Zhua. That's one of the 9 major clans of the Zhenwu Empire. Feng Wu said, Oh really? Was it the Zhua family? Maybe I was too young and heard wrong. With a wave of her hand, the white fairy said decisively, I'm sure of it. It has to be them. Back when I was with him, he didn't like the Zhua family. It had to be one of them. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. It didn't make sense. Because her third senior brother didn't like the Zhua family, it had to be them who injured him. That didn't make sense at all. However, it would do Feng Wu good if the white fairy hated the Zhua family. So she wanted to keep things that way. She said, Oh, I see. That family is very influential in the Zhenwu Empire. Their daughter Zhua Qingwan is a genius. She's already a spiritual lord. A spiritual lord is nothing. The white fairy threw a dirty look at Feng Wu. Didn't you save Chu Fengxiao? He always repays those who help him. So didn't he teach you anything? A little help would go a long way for you. Feng Wu said, The white fairy grew suspicious and narrowed her eyes. He really didn't teach you anything. Feng Wu immediately asked Little Phoenix, Hey, I think the fairy is suspicious. What do I do now? Little Phoenix said, I'm trying, but I just can't remember what Chu Fengxiao was good at. Gosh, it was so many years ago. I just can't remember. Little Phoenix smacked its own head. Meanwhile, the white fairy kept her gaze on Feng Wu and grew even more suspicious. Feng Wu snorted. Uncle Chu wasn't nice at all. That immediately set the white fairy off. What did you say? Say that again, I dare you. Right away, dust filled the air, and the sinister wind chilled Feng Wu to the bone. It gave her the creeps. Feng Wu raised her chin and said, "It's true. Uncle Chu Fengxiao bragged about how capable he was, and that he could do everything. In fact, he only taught me to read and write. There was nothing else. I was so mad." The white fairy gave Feng Wu a strange look. Feng Wu was alarmed and wondered if she had said something wrong, because the fairy was looking at her like she was a little idiot. She cringed. The white fairy stared at Feng Wu and said, "You little fool." Feng Wu looked perplexed. The white fairy said, "He taught you how to draw, didn't he?" Actually, it was her beautiful master who had taught Feng Wu. Seeing the confident look on the white fairy's face, however, Feng Wu could only nod. The white fairy snorted. "I knew it. Fengxiao was the best painter. No one was his match in that aspect. What he taught you is enough to sustain you for a lifetime. What more do you want?" Feng Wu didn't know what to say. Her third senior brother had to have learned from her beautiful master, and since she had as well, they had similar styles. Hence, the white fairy was mistaken. However, Chapter 1767. Feng Wu's Powerful Patron 1. Chapter 1767. Feng Wu's Powerful Patron 1. Of course Feng Wu wouldn't point her in the right direction. Therefore Feng Wu nodded repeatedly. "That's right. Uncle Chu was indeed the one who taught me how to draw." She didn't mean to call her third senior brother Uncle Chu, but she knew that if she didn't address him that way, the white fairy would consider her a love rival, and she would be doomed. As expected, after hearing Feng Wu's Uncle Chu, the white fairy was much nicer, and behaved like a kind aunt. The white fairy couldn't stop smiling when she talked about Chu Fengxiao, and she looked very proud. The world only knows him as an expert swordsman with unfathomable cultivation, but what they don't know is that he's an exceptional painter. Feng Wu looked intrigued and asked with sparkling eyes, "Really? Why haven't I heard of him before?" The white fairy said, "Of course you haven't. He uses another name for his paintings, Wind Moon." The white fairy sounded very proud. Wind Moon is known as Master Wind, and a single painting of his can be worth a fortune. One can't just buy it with money, because his paintings contain swordplay manuals, and you can improve greatly if you can figure out a fraction of what the paintings contain. You haven't heard of him, because you're too young. All the older generations know who he is. Master Teacher C. Basie nodded. Wind Moon was indeed a great painter, and he had known all along that he was Chu Fengxiao. Seeing Feng Wu's sparkling eyes, the white fairy said proudly, "Do you think painting is all he can do? You can't be any more wrong. Apart from drawing, Fengxiao is an expert sculptor as well. Your Junhua Empire still keeps his Sunshine Mountain as a national treasure." He was of high birth and used to be a prince of the Nanchu Empire, but he had no interest in the throne. All he wanted was to live a carefree life. He made great achievements in poetry, music and seal cutting. Once he sets out to do something, he devotes himself completely to it. He's an expert in so many fields and excels in all of them. He only learned swordplay later, after he grew tired of being a cultured scholar. When he picked up swordplay, he was already 18. People say that 18 is too old to start learning swordplay. But you know what? Fengxiao just put everything else down and started from scratch. When he learned calligraphy, he immediately created his own style and became a master. And his paintings are so unique that they're treated as national treasures. People couldn't wait to get their hands on his new poems, and his moves when he was on stage were impeccable. He's so talented that he can master everything he learns. He reminds people of the wind and the moon. He started as a profligate and unrestrained man, but he also has the heart of a child. When he became the top swordsman, he became quite introverted and steady. He really is the most unique man I've ever met. How can anyone not find him attractive? The white fairy didn't try to hide her affection for Chu Fengxiao. "So, if you dare say one nasty word about him, I'll kill you." Feng Wu had no idea that her third senior brother could be so amazing. Even she herself found the man very lovely, to say nothing of the white fairy. Chapter 1768. Feng Wu's Powerful Patron 2. Chapter 1768. Feng Wu's Powerful Patron 2. He started at 18, and became the top swordsman. That was almost an impossible task. Little Phoenix said in Feng Wu's head. That's right. My master spoke highly of Chu Fengxiao. Feng Wu asked. What did he say? Little Phoenix said. The master called him an earnest man. Feng Wu gave it some thought and nodded. Only an earnest man could be so devoted and focused in everything he learned, which was how he was able to comprehend everything so thoroughly. Little Phoenix asked. Do you remember the windy sword intent the master taught you? Feng Wu said. I do. It's just that my beautiful master never allowed me to use it, saying that it wasn't time yet. Little Phoenix looked at Feng Wu and said earnestly. The master taught Chu Fengxiao the windy sword intent as well. He mastered it, and became the best swordsman of his time. Feng Wu looked perplexed. Little Phoenix said. The master said that it wasn't time yet because your moves weren't fast enough for your sword intent. After all, you were still a child. It was natural that you couldn't comprehend everything. Feng Wu said, Really? Little Phoenix said. If I'm right, this white fairy should be the sword spirit of Chu Fengxiao's merry sun sword. Feng Wu said. She's a sword spirit? That was a surprise. She had always thought that the white fairy was a girl who had grown up with her third senior brother. It never occurred to her that she would be a sword spirit. Little Phoenix told Feng Wu in a serious voice. The sword spirit of your fallen star sword has always been muddle-headed and isn't intelligent enough. If the white fairy can refine the sword spirit for you, it'll benefit you greatly. Feng Wu rubbed her chin. I don't think that'll be very easy to achieve. Chu Fengxiao was all that the white fairy cared about. She probably wouldn't care about anything else. The white fairy glanced at Feng Wu and asked, Hey, what are you thinking? Are you doubting me? She was happy to talk about Chu Fengxiao, so despite the serious look on her face, she wasn't angry. Feng Wu searched her memories and soon, her eyes lit up. Actually, Uncle Chu didn't just teach me how to draw. He taught me how to wield a sword as well, although only 3 stances. What? The white fairy's eyes lit up. Show me the stances now. That was what Feng Wu had been waiting for, so she nodded. Sure. The beautiful master had created the fallen star swordplay according to Feng Wu's talent, and it was to be used together with the fallen star sword. However, he fell back into his long slumber after teaching her 3 stances, which were all Feng Wu could demonstrate now. The first stance, Sword of the Other World. The second stance, Star and Moon. The third stance, Fatal Thunder. The white fairy stared at Feng Wu and murmured. The swordplay only has 3 stances, but each stance is more powerful than the previous one, and the sword intent keeps increasing. Are there any more? She studied Feng Wu's face. Feng Wu shook her head. No, that's all. The white fairy sighed. Chu Fengxiao is indeed as capable as he's said to be. Although there are only 3 stances, they're so well balanced that you can't find any weaknesses in them. What's more important is that the sword intent can increase. These 3 stances are enough to enable you to kill someone several levels higher than you. Feng Wu nodded. That was true. Chapter 1769, A Great Opportunity, 1. Chapter 1769, A Great Opportunity, 1. The white fairy said, I'm a sword spirit, but I'm not as good as him in terms of sword intent, not by any means. Feng Wu thought. The swordplay was created by my beautiful master, not my third senior brother. Of course you're not as good as my beautiful master. I have no idea where he is now. The white fairy smiled wryly. Feng Wu wondered how the white fairy became one of the ghost kings of the land of the spirit source, when she was the sword spirit of the merry sun sword. What happened between her and Feng Wu's third senior brother? It had to be a very long story. But Feng Wu knew that the white fairy would never tell her. Your swordplay is perfect, and no one should tamper with it. However, your sword spirit is too dumb, said the white fairy. Since Chu Fengxiao taught you the swordplay, I must train your sword spirit. That suited Feng Wu's intent perfectly well. She had been waiting for the white fairy to say that. However, is my sword spirit dumb? I find her quite nice. Nice. The white fairy wanted to smack Feng Wu on the head. Your sword spirit is a dimwit with no intelligence at all. She's a little idiot. She doesn't deserve such an excellent swordplay. Feng Wu looked as baffled as her sword spirit. What? The white fairy snorted. Since Chu Fengxiao taught you how to use a sword, I have to leave my mark as well. I'm doing it, with or without your permission. Feng Wu said, all right. Little Phoenix was cracking up in the ring space. The white fairy had fallen right into Feng Wu's trap. If she knew that this was all part of Feng Wu's plan, she would be furious beyond measure. The white fairy glared at Feng Wu. And why do you look so reluctant? Do you know what it will cost me to train your sword spirit? Feng Wu said, well, if the price is too high, maybe we shouldn't. No. I have to be part of Chu Fengxiao's swordplay. If you try to stop me, I'll kill you. The white fairy threatened her. Feng Wu said in a pitiful voice, all right. The white fairy then grabbed the fallen star sword from Feng Wu. The next second, she disappeared from sight. The fallen star sword suddenly flew out of Feng Wu's hand and started flying around in midair. The fallen star sword was connected to Feng Wu's soul, so when the sword misbehaved, she spat out a mouthful of blood, feeling as if her insides were boiling. All was silent around them. Seven and Sapphira were right outside the cave. The two of them looked at each other and hesitated. Sapphira was the first to react. She poked Seven in the arm. Go! Seven looked at her with a frown. Sapphira stared at Seven. Have you forgotten my brother's order? Seven was speechless. Sapphira said, Seven, don't tell me you've forgotten who you are. That white ghost can't be that scary. Of course Seven hadn't forgotten. How could he? At that thought, Seven tightened his grip on his sword, which hummed a little. Feng Wu. Seven charged at Feng Wu, moving like a shooting star. He put all his energy into that strike. Sword energy filled the air. And it was aimed right at Feng Wu. Chapter 1770, A Great Opportunity Too. Chapter 1770, A Great Opportunity Too. Thousands of kilometers away at the center of the land of the spirit source, Master Teacher C. Basie suddenly opened his half-lidded eyes. The girl was in danger. He was so far away that even if he wanted to interfere, he wouldn't be in time. After seeing all there was to see in the world, this formidable man regretted, for the first time, not making a move early enough. So be it. Master Teacher C. Basie sighed inwardly. If the kid managed to survive this, he might consider taking her in as an indirect disciple. However, he didn't find it very likely that she would dodge that fatal strike from Seven. After all, it was the most powerful stance of a powerful spiritual lord. Whoosh! The air seemed to tear before that force. It was such fierce energy. Murderous intent filled the air. And there was a ferocious look in his eyes. Whoosh! The sword flew through the air. And it was aimed at Feng Wu's throat. It was unstoppable. Die! The sword energy rushed forward like a raging torrent. The blade shone like a streak of lightning. The light almost blinded Feng Wu. The killing intent surrounded Feng Wu and rendered her motionless. She couldn't even lift a finger. Feng Wu's stomach lurched. Knock, knock, knock. Her heart almost jumped out of her mouth. She stared at the sword. The pressure was indescribable, and her heart raced. Whoosh! The shadow of death seemed to have cornered her. Everyone was convinced that Feng Wu was going to die, including Master Teacher C. Basie. Sapphira smiled wholeheartedly. She was convinced that Feng Wu was going to die. The sword was only 10 centimeters away. Everyone thought that Feng Wu couldn't possibly dodge the attack. Whoosh! At that critical moment, Feng Wu fell back until her body was almost parallel to the ground. Her body was unbelievably flexible. And she was incredibly swift. Whoosh! Seven's sword missed its target. Master Teacher C. Basie looked surprised. The unbelievable angle, her flexible body and her top speed. She would be the perfect candidate to study his graph of the netherworld. She was the genius he had been searching for years. The next second, the most formidable man on the grassland, and the master teacher respected by all the people of the grassland, felt nervous for the very first time. Whoosh! From thousands of kilometers away, a hand struck down, giving off a streak of energy like an erupting volcano. Seven had no idea that he was about to die. Turning around, he pointed his sword at Feng Wu again. Dodging had almost drained her of energy, and it was very difficult for her to do it again. After all, that was a strike from a spiritual lord. Whoosh! The sword seemed to roar. The tip of the sword had almost reached Feng Wu, and there was a resolute look on her face. Lend your body to me for 100 years, and I'll fend it off for you. The white fairy made an offer. Feng Wu ignored her. You're going to die. The white fairy bellowed at Feng Wu. Feng Wu smirked and ignored her. Whoosh! The sword was about to reach Feng Wu. Chapter 1771. A Great Opportunity 3. Chapter 1771. A Great Opportunity 3. The terrifying sword energy blew at Feng Wu's face, and the pressure was almost suffocating. The look in Feng Wu's eyes was as cold as ice. The beautiful master had told her once that the fallen star sword could fend off a lethal attack, and Feng Wu had always believed him. However, at that critical moment, thump! A streak of white light suddenly flew over and pierced Seven's body. Seven's sword was only centimeters away from Feng Wu's forehead. One more second, and he would have killed Feng Wu, but that was something that would never happen. Because he was dead. The white fairy was astonished. She had tried to use the opportunity to make a deal with Feng Wu, but the girl was so stubborn, and just wouldn't give up her body. However, even without Feng Wu's request, she was still going to help her. As it turned out, it wasn't necessary. Feng Wu was baffled. She stared at Seven in disbelief. Meanwhile, Seven was still in that pose of holding the sword, but he was completely stiff. Feng Wu stuck out a finger and poked his sword. Bang! Seven fell backward. With a thump he fell down, but he remained in that strange position. Feng Wu and the white fairy looked at each other, and both looked astonished. Neither had any idea what happened. They couldn't understand how Seven, who was so ferocious a moment ago, suddenly dropped dead. Of course, Sapphira was the most astonished of them all. The princess was completely baffled. Her eyes were wide open as she stared at Seven's dead body. How did that happen? How could this be possible? Seven could have killed Feng Wu. His sword was only centimeters away from her. It was that close. Sapphira immediately ran to Seven's side, crouched down, and checked his breathing. There was none. She then checked his pulse. She couldn't find one either. Thump! Sapphira dropped to the ground and stared at Seven in disbelief. Dead. He really was dead. The last bit of hope she had was all but destroyed. She felt chilled to the bone. There was a streak of white light and Seven's dead. Sapphira stared at Feng Wu and murmured. Feng Wu shrugged. She had no idea either. What on earth is going on? What did you do? Feng Wu, are you even human? Sapphira stared at Feng Wu. She wanted to charge at her but didn't dare to. A chill ran down her spine, and there was fear in her eyes. Just then, there was another streak of white light. WTF? Sapphira was so jumpy that she stumbled back. However, when she saw who it was, her eyes popped out. Because it was none other than Master Teacher. Sapphira was astonished. She had no idea that she would see him here. Her body reacted more quickly than her head, and she dropped to her knees. Chapter 1772. A Great Opportunity for. Chapter 1772. A Great Opportunity for. Watch out. The white fairy lowered her voice and whispered to Feng Wu. Because Feng Wu and her sword spirit had a bond between them. When the white fairy entered the fallen star sword willingly, she had formed a connection with Feng Wu as well. No one else could hear them when they communicated with their minds. Feng Wu also felt the pressure. It was an old man wearing a red and yellow cassock with a stately look about him. His eyes reminded them of ice, and he seemed to bring heavy clouds with him wherever he went. The energy filled the space. Even Sapphira, who was unbelievably arrogant, prostrated on the ground and acted as harmless as a lamb. Master Teacher. Feng Wu stood where she was and studied the man without twitching a muscle. The majestic Master Teacher Baisi was studying Feng Wu as well. The white fairy warned Feng Wu. This man is very capable, and in my current form, I'm not his match. You better be careful. Meanwhile, despite the reverence she showed, Sapphira was laughing inwardly. Ha ha ha. She thought. Feng Wu, how dare you look at him like that? Do you know who he is? He's the most respected master teacher of the grassland. He's also the most capable man here. Even my father respects him greatly. Do you know what his frenzied followers will do to you if you offend him? How dare you look at him in such a disrespectful way? You're doomed. Sapphira was over the moon. Although Seven was dead, Feng Wu wasn't going to live either. Because the master teacher wasn't exactly a kind man. Feng Wu had no idea what was going on in Sapphira's head. Tilting her head, she studied the master teacher with her bright eyes and smiled at him. How can I help you? The white fairy gave Feng Wu a "you idiot" look. Although she didn't fear the master teacher the way Sapphira did, she had to admit that he was a terrifyingly capable man. After all, he was like God in this place. One could say that he was the ruler of the land of the spirit source, and he alone could decide who lived or died. The master teacher studied Feng Wu carefully, looking at her from head to toe. With her unique features and great posture, especially her impossible moves, he was sure that she was the only candidate. At that thought, he smiled at Feng Wu. He smiled. Sapphira was so shocked that she couldn't believe her eyes. That couldn't be. Sapphira didn't get to meet the master teacher so often, but this was the first time she had ever seen him smile. She had always remembered him as this unapproachable, majestic figure who reminded her of God. In comparison, she felt like something living in the mud, but this time he was smiling. Moreover, he was smiling at Feng Wu. Somehow, Sapphira had a very bad feeling. However, she was afraid of the master teacher, and only dared to steal a glance at him every now and then. When the master teacher smiled, the heavy mood was lifted, and the sky seemed to clear up. Chapter 1773, A Great Opportunity 5. Chapter 1773, A Great Opportunity 5. The change in the atmosphere seemed to cheer everyone up. You're Feng Wu, aren't you? The master teacher smiled at her. Feng Wu tilted her head. And you're the master teacher? The master teacher nodded. Feng Wu, I'd like to ask you, do you want to be my disciple? At those words, everyone else went completely silent. No one made a sound. Sapphira looked like she was being choked. She just stood there looking rather dumb. In fact, Sapphira didn't know what to think. What? What did the master teacher say? Do you want to be my disciple? Sapphira wondered if the world had gone crazy. She had wanted to become his disciple since she was born. Her talented senior brother had always been deemed the most qualified one to become the master teacher's disciple. The master teacher had been searching for a disciple for years and years. But, Feng Wu, why? Sapphira couldn't believe her ears. While Sapphira refused to accept reality, Feng Wu was surprised as well. She looked at the old monk in confusion. Master teacher, what did you just say? The old monk studied Feng Wu, and the more he looked at her, the more amazed he was. She was such a treasure. He wondered which master had done the trick, hiding the girl's talent from the world. Your physical features are unmatched. You're such a genius. A genius. If master teacher Si Baisi was only interested in having Feng Wu as a disciple in the beginning, after he looked past the deceptive trick and saw how talented she really was, he decided that it had to be her. Yes, he was staring at Feng Wu, as if she was an invaluable treasure, the one-of-a-kind type. The look gave Feng Wu the creeps. She stepped back and gave Si Baisi a strange look. Hey kiddo, what are you afraid of? I won't eat you, Si Baisi said grumpily. That tone and that look. Sapphira was so angry. This wasn't possible. It shouldn't happen. Sapphira remembered clearly that the master teacher always looked aloof and unattached even when he spoke to her father. He had always looked like a statue in a shrine. But why did he look like an ordinary grandfather when he talked to Feng Wu? No. Something had to be wrong. Feng Wu had no idea how the master teacher treated the others. She only knew that the old man was up to no good. Therefore, she stepped back, stared at the master teacher cautiously, and was ready for a fight. The master teacher looked at Feng Wu in resignation. You're such a cautious girl, aren't you? Look at him. The master teacher pointed at 7 and said grumpily, "If it weren't for me, you'd be dead now." Feng Wu had her suspicions before, but what the master teacher said confirmed them. Chapter 1774. Chapter 1774. A Great Opportunity 6. Was it really you who killed him? Feng Wu asked with twinkling eyes. The master teacher said proudly yes. Feng Wu said. A streak of white light charged at him from very far away. It then entered his body and he was dead. The master teacher raised his chin, enjoying the praise. Feng Wu nodded. That was indeed very impressive. The master teacher checked, and looked like an old man trying to lure in a little girl with candy. So kiddo, do you want to learn how to do that? If you let me teach you, I guarantee that within 3 years, you'll be able to kill a spiritual lord like slaughtering a dog. Other people might find it a bold statement, but the master teacher meant every word. No one knew exactly how capable the mysterious old man was, for he was the most powerful cultivator in the entire Sino grassland. All they knew was that he was one of the most advanced cultivators on this continent. The white fairy looked surprised. She then turned her gaze on Feng Wu. Feng Wu communicated with her through her mind. She said, "What? Why are you looking at me like that?" The white fairy said, "What kind of person are you? How can you be so lucky?" Feng Wu was speechless. "I'm lucky," the white fairy said. "You've run into me, the rarest ghost king. Isn't that lucky enough?" Feng Wu pursed her lips. "Do you call yourself good luck?" The white fairy raised her hand to smack Feng Wu. Feng Wu said, "Ahem. Please don't do that. We still have more pressing matters to attend to here." The white fairy snorted, and went back to training the sword spirit of the fallen star sword for Feng Wu. Just then, the master teacher asked in an unhurried tone, "Have the two of you reached an agreement yet?" Feng Wu's stomach lurched. "What did you say?" "The white fairy ghost king has entered your sword. You're a lucky girl." The master teacher liked Feng Wu even more, and he smiled at Feng Wu. Lien the white fairy is one of the 3 villains of the land of the spirit source. In other words, you've tamed one of the 3 ghost kings. Aren't you the lucky one? One of the 3 ghost kings. Feng Wu had tamed it. A few steps away, Sapphiro, who was still prostrating on the ground, was astonished. How was that even possible? How did Feng Wu do that? What kind of person was she? "Do you want the seed of the spirit source?" What the master teacher said after that shocked Sapphiro. The seed of the spirit source. The seed of the spirit source. Sapphiro was almost in tears. Chieftain Sinal had brought elite members of the entire grassland here. Emperor Wu had also brought elite members of the entire Zhenwu Empire. What for? They were all here for the seed of the spirit source, which only appeared once every 3 years. But now, the master teacher was asking Feng Wu in the most careless tone if she wanted that seed. Anybody would say yes. Sapphiro stared at Feng Wu with bloodshot eyes. If 7 was still alive, he would have jumped to his feet as well. But Feng Wu wasn't as excited as Sapphiro. Instead, she looked rather alarmed. Staring at the master teacher, she asked coldly, "The seed of the spirit source? What's that?" Little Phoenix had told Feng Wu about how impressive the seed of the spirit source was. But Feng Wu still needed to hear an affirmative answer. Crossing his hands behind his back, the master teacher smiled at Feng Wu. "It's a great opportunity. It'll raise your cultivation level by an entire stage." Feng Wu's eyes widened, and she stared at the master teacher in astonishment. Chapter 1775. I'm your master. Chapter 1775. I'm your master. The master teacher nodded with a smile. "You're a level 7 spiritual elder now. If you obtain the seed of the spirit source, you'll become a level 7 spiritual lord." Wow! Sapphiro's eyes turned blood red with jealousy, and her heart raced. At the same moment, Feng Wu. She would be lying if she said that she wasn't excited. Feng Wu clenched her fists in her sleeves to fight back her excitement. An entire stage. As a level 7 spiritual elder, she had enough power to handle someone like Zhuo Qingyu. But she still had a long way to go to catch up with Zhuo Qingwan. She still had to get revenge for her beautiful master. and her once destroyed ability, and her damaged reputation, and the opportunities she had been deprived of. Although Feng Wu seldom mentioned it, she had never forgotten any of them. She had kept her silence because she wasn't strong enough yet. At the thought of the family she wanted to protect, and the dignity she needed to get back, Feng Wu clenched her fists. Is the seed of the spirit source really as powerful as you say? The master teacher nodded. Feng Wu asked, will it really be able to raise my level by a whole stage? The master teacher nodded again. Feng Wu asked, in that case, how am I going to get it? Sapphiro stared at Feng Wu, as if she had heard the most insane words. How dare she ask that question? The seed of the spirit source was something only Ranmil had a chance at. Feng Wu, who the hell did she think she was? Feng Wu looked at the master teacher and asked in a serious tone. Master teacher, how can I get the seed of the spirit source? The master teacher smiled at Feng Wu and said casually, that's easy. Become my disciple, and the seed of the spirit source is yours. With a wave of his hand, a seed the shape of a golden lotus floated into the air. The plump golden seed gave off some very dense and pure spiritual essence. Once one saw it, they couldn't look away. The seed of the spirit source. Sapphiro was so jealous that her eyes popped. All Feng Wu had to do was become his disciple. The seed was an incredible treasure that could raise one's cultivation level by an entire stage. But to become the master teacher's disciple was an even rarer chance than obtaining the seed. It could be considered the greatest opportunity of all time. And Feng Wu had been granted both of them. Was she even human? No living person should be that lucky. Sapphiro stared at Feng Wu. Meanwhile, Feng Wu stepped forward. Sapphiro cried out, wait, master teacher, are you exploiting public office for private gain now? The air seemed to freeze at that moment. Everyone stared at Sapphiro, and Feng Wu looked at her as if she was already a dead person. So did the ghosts. They started to consider Sapphiro one of them. Tilting his head, the master teacher turned his gaze on Sapphiro. He had smiled like a kind grandpa when he looked at Feng Wu, but now, cold murderous energy filled the air. Sapphiro felt as if she was being choked by an invisible hand. Exploiting public office for private gain? The mysterious and well-respected master teacher grinned. You're correct. Chapter 1776. I only have one master 1. Chapter 1776. I only have one master 1. Sapphiro said. What? The master teacher nodded with a half-smile. I'm doing that. So what? The old man held the golden lotus in his hand and smiled at Feng Wu. Kiddo, what's your answer? He completely ignored Sapphiro, as if she was already dead. What was her answer? Sapphiro stared at Feng Wu. She wondered what Feng Wu was waiting for. If she were given the chance, she would have already dropped to her knees and greeted her new master. However, Feng Wu, she only frowned at Master Teacher C. Basie, looking rather troubled. She was troubled? Why? Sapphiro couldn't believe that Feng Wu could be so idiotic. To her disbelief, Feng Wu actually, you're the most capable man on the grassland, and I'm afraid that you're too good for me. Sorry, Master Teacher, but I have to say no to your offer. What? Feng Wu's words astonished everyone. Sapphiro couldn't believe her ears. Even the White Fairy found Feng Wu's choice very strange. She had to remind her, hey kid, aren't you a bit too proud? Feng Wu asked, am I? The White Fairy said, Master Teacher C. Basie isn't just the most powerful man on the grassland. Only a handful of people have ever been his match on the entire continent, including your Uncle Chu. How can you turn down his offer when he wants to be your master? Feng Wu shook her head. The White Fairy asked, why? Feng Wu said, I already have the best master in the world. I can't possibly take a new master. The White Fairy asked, who's your master? Feng Wu smiled. I can't tell you who he is, but he does have a connection with you. The White Fairy frowned. A connection with her? Who could that be? Master Teacher C. Basie was surprised by Feng Wu's reply as well. But he calmed down almost immediately and looked at Feng Wu with cold eyes. Kiddo, are you sure about this? Feng Wu nodded and said, yes. If you become my disciple, you might not become the most capable cultivator in the entire world, but I can guarantee that you'll be one of the top 3. Will you still say no? Yes, I've made up my mind. Master Teacher C. Basie had been a genius monk when he was young, and was now a genius master teacher later in life. No one had ever said no to him. He would be lying if he said that he didn't feel frustrated. However, the master teacher remained very calm, and he nodded at Feng Wu. If you change your mind, feel free to come to me any time. Sapphiro stared at him in disbelief. No, this can't possibly be happening. Isn't he supposed to be the most aloof cultivator, who's beyond everyone's reach? Feng Wu turned him down. Why doesn't he just kill her? Thought Sapphiro. But the master teacher wasn't angry at all. Instead, he smiled at Feng Wu as he spoke. Feng Wu nodded with a smile. All right. But she would never change her mind. For as long as she lived, the beautiful master would be her one and only master. The tombs will appear in Shilu Mountain in 2 hours. Before he left, the master teacher couldn't help but give Feng Wu a hint. After that, he promptly left. He agreed that Feng Wu had great potential, but that was about it. She wasn't the only one out there. Chapter 1777. I only have one master too. Chapter 1777. I only have one master too. Nuts. You're nuts. Sapphiro threw a dirty look at Feng Wu before dashing off. The white fairy was speechless. What kind of princess is she? I'm gonna kill her. Feng Wu cleared her throat. I mean it. I'm not joking. The white fairy threw a dirty look at Feng Wu. Do you know how jealous other people will be if they hear that C. Basie wants to take you as his disciple? If that princess tells other people about it, you'll die. Feng Wu smiled. Don't worry. She won't do that. The white fairy asked, why? Feng Wu glanced at the white fairy, and wondered if the fairy had been a ghost for too long to understand human nature, or if she had always been like this. Why? The white fairy asked. Feng Wu smiled wryly. Because of human nature. Sapphiro has always considered me her rival, but she has never been able to win, which is why she holds a lot of grudges against me. Moreover, she desperately wants to become Master Teacher C. Basie's disciple. While I turned down the offer when I was given the opportunity, no matter how angry she is, she'll never tell anyone else, because it won't do her any good. The white fairy agreed with her. However, so, you do know what you've missed out on, she said grumpily. Do you know what a great opportunity you've turned down? Becoming Master Teacher C. Basie's disciple is more important than any other matter on the Sinnoh grassland. Do I have to remind you of that? Feng Wu smiled. But the entire continent combined together isn't as important as my beautiful master. Who's your beautiful master? The white fairy asked curiously. Hey, don't tell me it's Chu Fengxiao. She didn't like the thought of that at all. Feng Wu rolled her eyes. Your Chu Fengxiao is nowhere near as good as my beautiful master. The white fairy didn't like the fact that Feng Wu didn't think highly of Chu Fengxiao, but she liked the sound of your Chu Fengxiao. Seeing the infatuated look on the white fairy's face, Feng Wu smiled wryly. She wondered what kind of man her third senior brother was. The white fairy still couldn't forget him after so many years. By the way, what are the tombs in Shilu Mountain? Feng Wu suddenly remembered what Master Teacher C. Basie said before he left. Well, about that, the white fairy gave Feng Wu a strange look. Feng Wu said, What? Do you know how creepy you look? Tilting her head, the white fairy contemplated. Hey, what's going on? That look on your face will give me the wrong idea. Feng Wu tugged at the white fairy's sleeve. Tell me, are you sure we're not rivals? The white fairy asked grumpily. Feng Wu asked, Why should we be rivals? Because of Chu Fengxiao, of course. Are you sure you're not in love with him? The white fairy stared at Feng Wu with the most serious look in her eyes. Feng Wu rolled her eyes at her. How can I possibly be in love with him? Even my beautiful master is a more likely candidate. I'd rather fall in love with Jun Linyuan than with Chu Fengxiao. Jun Linyuan? Where have I heard that name before? The white fairy searched her memory, then suddenly clapped her hands. That's right. Every time the land of the spirit source opens, someone would mention his name, saying that if he were here, No one else would be able to get the seed. He must be an impressive young man. Chapter 1778. I only have one master 3. Chapter 1778. I only have one master 3. Feng Wu said, yes. Not only is he young and capable, he's also the most talented person this continent has ever seen. He'll obtain many more achievements than your Chu Fengxiao in the future. So how can I possibly fall for Chu Fengxiao? Plus, he's way too old for me. The white fairy liked everything Feng Wu said. She didn't feel threatened at all now. Draw a picture of Jun Linyuan so that I can see what he looks like. The white fairy still considered her Chu Fengxiao to be the most good-looking man. Feng Wu had learned her drawing skills from her beautiful master. Just like Chu Fengxiao, she was very good at depicting reality. Therefore, when Jun Linyuan's face appeared on the wall, the white fairy's eyes widened. You're lying. Feng Wu was confused. Why do you say that? The white fairy said, of course you're lying. Chu Fengxiao's paintings are all about depicting reality, but you're making things up. Such a handsome teenager can't exist. It's only your imagination. Feng Wu was speechless. You know nothing. Jun Linyuan looks just like this, and many people have seen him. That princess knows what he looks like. Why don't you ask her? Feng Wu almost wanted to tell her that her beautiful master was also a very, very handsome man. The white fairy agreed with Feng Wu, so she raised her hand. Whoosh! Her long white sleeve flew out of the cave. Sapphiro had run out after Si Baisi to beg him to take her in as his disciple, but by the time she went outside, the master teacher was already gone. She was still wondering what to do, when a long white sleeve wrapped around her and dragged her back. Before she knew it, she was lying on the ground next to Feng Wu. Thump! The fall almost made her pass out. Tell me who this is. The white fairy pointed at the handsome face on the wall. Jun Linyuan? Why is there a portrait of him here? Sapphiro stared at Feng Wu. Are you nuts? Why did you draw Jun Linyuan's face? Do you want this ghost to track him? Is this how you show your affection? Feng Wu, I'm so disappointed. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. How could she retort back? After all, the white fairy would love to hear this. She was right. The white fairy found the portrait dubious at first, but after hearing what Sapphiro said, she believed that Feng Wu was in love with Jun Linyuan, and was much more reassured. The truth was that although Feng Wu was still a teenage girl, she was pretty enough to make all women feel threatened. You can go now. The white fairy gave a swift wave of her hand, and Sapphiro was nowhere to be seen. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. The woman might look like a lofty fairy, but she was in fact a merciless fiend, someone she couldn't afford to offend. Fine, I'll believe you for now. The white fairy glanced at Jun Linyuan's portrait and said, the teenager is quite handsome, but Chu Fengxiao is definitely better looking and more talented. Feng Wu nodded repeatedly. Although the white fairy wasn't as good as master teacher Si Baisi, she still wasn't someone Feng Wu could easily defeat. She was quite a terrifying figure. The white fairy said, all right. Since you're not my love rival, you're kind of a friend now. I don't mind giving you the opportunity, but remember this, you owe me one. Chapter 1779. I only have one master for. Chapter 1779. I only have one master for. Feng Wu said, forget it then. I won't go to Shilu Mountain. The white fairy smirked. Don't you want the seed of the spirit source anymore? Feng Wu said, of course I do. I can raise my cultivation by a whole stage. Anyone would want it. The white fairy looked Feng Wu up and down and smirked. Well, since you're only a petty spiritual elder now, pretty much everyone can pick on you. Once you become a spiritual lord, you'll finally be able to walk around safely on this continent. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. This white fairy was so arrogant. Only a spiritual lord could walk around safely on this continent. What about those who weren't spiritual lords yet? Haven't you heard the saying, that anyone lesser than a spiritual lord is a mere ant? The white fairy glanced at Feng Wu, and sounded as if she was talking about something as common as eating or drinking. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. To her, spiritual lords were very capable cultivators. They were called lords, Because once people reached that level, as long as they were willing to work for the empire, they were capable enough to become lords. But to the White Fairy, anyone lesser than a spiritual lord was nothing but an ant. That was such a terrible way to put it. It was always like that in my time. I can only come to the conclusion that the Junhua Empire isn't all that great after all, the White Fairy said indifferently. Now you know how useless a level 7 spiritual elder is. Feng Wu sighed in resignation. She had only just become a level 7 spiritual elder, when she had been a level 3 before. Doubtlessly, it was a level the White Fairy would laugh at. Come, let's go to Shilu Mountain. The White Fairy led the way. We have to get that seed this time, no matter what. Feng Wu asked. Doesn't Master Basie have that seed? The White Fairy said grumpily. That old man isn't that shameless. He said he would give you the seed of the spirit source. But he wasn't just going to give it to you directly. Rather, he would have helped you get it by following the rules of the game. Did you really think that he would have just handed it to you? He's also bound by the rules of natural law. He'll be damned by heaven if he gives you help unconditionally. Feng Wu's eyes lit up. I thought I lost the seed of the spirit source for good when I turned down Master Basie. The White Fairy said grumpily. Someone is going to get that seed. If that old man won't help you, it'll go to the luckiest party, which will be us. That's right. Feng Wu clenched her fists. Now tell me the truth. You really don't like Chu Fengxiao, do you? The White Fairy stared at Feng Wu. Feng Wu rolled her eyes at her. What do you think? At the thought of Jun Linyuan, the White Fairy nodded. I'll believe you this once. As long as you're not in love with Chu Fengxiao, we can work as friends. Feng Wu smiled. All right. The White Fairy might go on and on about the man she loved all the time, but she could be very serious when she needed to. The White Fairy asked. Do you know that there are 3 ghost kings in the land of the spirit source? Feng Wu shook her head. The White Fairy smacked Feng Wu on the head. Ouch, that hurts. The White Fairy wasn't gentle, and the pain almost made Fairy cry. You don't even know that? What are you doing here in the land of the spirit source? The White Fairy said in frustration. It's so annoying that you even have the Ghost King seal, which is something everyone wants to get their hands on. Feng Wu grimaced. There's no need to hit me. Chapter 1780. I only have one master 5. Chapter 1780. I only have one master 5. The White Fairy snorted. Why not? I can do whatever I want. As the princess of a long-gone dynasty, the White Fairy was born with arrogance and a bad temper. She stared at Feng Wu. Where did you get that seal? Feng Wu then told her about the 10 Directions seal, which Sapphiro had given her as compensation, and how the Ghost King's seal had been hidden inside. She shrugged. Sapphiro just gave me the first thing she could find. She wasn't sincere at all. The White Fairy stared at Feng Wu in resignation. Don't brag about it. It's not nice. Feng Wu cleared her throat again. The White Fairy said, You naughty girl. You know so little but you're so lucky. You have the Ghost King seal. Master Teacher Basie wants to be your master, and even I'm helping you. Do you know anyone else this lucky? What kind of family are you from? Feng Wu smiled wryly. She wondered if the White Fairy had been a ghost for so long that she couldn't stop nagging. She didn't look like an arrogant princess of a long-vanished dynasty at all. Now back to business. Let's talk about the 3 Ghost Kings. The White Fairy stared at Feng Wu and explained everything to her from the beginning. To get the seed of the spirit source, you need to fulfill 2 requirements. Feng Wu listened carefully. The look on the White Fairy's face also became very serious. First, you must have the Ghost King seal, which you already do. Feng Wu's eyes lit up. It was all thanks to Little Phoenix, since she had no idea that the seal was so important. Then, do you see the 3 empty slots on the seal? Feng Wu looked down at the seal and saw that there were indeed 3 slots in the shape of flames. Whoosh! The White Fairy waved her hand, and an orange flame flew out of her forehead and entered the Ghost King seal. Thump! It filled the first empty slot, but the seal wasn't hot to the touch. The White Fairy looked at Feng Wu and said seriously, This is my true flame. You can obtain a streak of it once you've gained my recognition. With it, you can light up the Ghost King seal. You need to gather the true flames from all 3 Ghost Kings before you can find the seed of the spirit source. Therefore, you need to find the layers of the other 2 and gain their recognition. She then glanced at Feng Wu. I need to remind you first, they're not as easygoing as I am. Feng Wu thought, you're not all that easygoing, okay? If it wasn't for Chu Fengxiao, my 3rd senior brother, you would have killed me already. The white fairy gave it some thought then frowned. Those 2 old beans can be quite a handful. But with my help, you have a big chance of winning. Come, let's go to Shilu Mountain. One of them lives there. At the same time, many other people also knew this information, and many of them wanted to get their hands on the seed of the spirit source. Therefore, a lot of people headed for the mountain as well. Up on Cornice Peak of Shilu Mountain, when Feng Wu arrived, she realized that there were too many people around. She saw many familiar faces. Many of her acquaintances from the Zhenwu Empire were there. Emperor Wu led the team himself, and he was surrounded by the heads of all the major families, including Lord Mu, Master Dugu, Master Zhua, Feng Yinfeng and their offspring. The princes Jun Wuxia, Zhuaqingyu Zhuaqingxian Dugu Yamo Feng Yuran Feng Sang, Feng Lu. All the young ones were here. Chapter 1781. I only have one master 6. Chapter 1781. I only have one master 6. Of the members of the younger generation, the second prince was the most capable one, followed by Zhuaqingxian. Lying flat on her stomach, Feng Wu looked down from above and saw everything that was going on below. Since she could see them, so could the white fairy, who had attached herself to the fallen star sword. The Zhenwu Empire has been doing well these days. Some of the younger ones are pretty good. Pointing at Zhuaqingxian, the white fairy told Feng Wu, do you see that young man in the blue robe? He's a level 1 spiritual lord, and he's more than you can handle. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. The white fairy said, and there's that young man in the yellow dragon robe. He's even more powerful than the one in blue. Wait, there's a secret hidden inside him. Feng Wu asked curiously, what secret? The white fairy wanted to keep Feng Wu guessing. I'll be punished if I reveal a heavenly secret. Don't make me do it. I'll let you know when it's your turn to fight him. Feng Wu frowned. If she was guessing correctly, the white fairy was talking about the second prince. The second prince lived a secluded life and seldom appeared in public. She didn't know that he had concealed his power so well. At such a young age, he was already a spiritual lord. If the white fairy hadn't pointed it out, she wouldn't have noticed. Had it not been for Jun Lingyuan's existence, the second prince would have been an impressive figure. Unfortunately, hey, those 2 are pretty good as well. See the pair in blue and purple? They're quite talented, and both are more powerful than you. Feng Wu saw that the white fairy had finally moved on to people on her side. Xian Yi and Feng Sun. As for the rest of them, the white fairy then turned to look at the members of the Sino grassland. That Sapphiro has no chance at all. That girl in white is quite talented. Hey, she's hiding the fact that she's a level 9 spiritual elder. Kiddo, you're not her match yet. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. The white fairy glanced at Feng Wu. See, even in the younger generation, there are 5 who are more capable than you, let alone all the talented people in other places on the continent. Feng Wu, you still have a very long way to go. Feng Wu tried to change the subject. Why are you looking at the young ones only? The white fairy glanced at Feng Wu. Feng Wu asked, what? The white fairy said, Feng Wu, do you really not know? Feng Wu said innocently, know what? Tell me please. The white fairy said, only those that haven't reached the spiritual king stage can take part in the competition, and they can't be over 20 years old. Glancing at Feng Wu, she added, otherwise if the spiritual kings get involved, other people won't have a chance at all. Feng Wu agreed with that. The white fairy said, the 5 people I mentioned will all be your competitors, so be careful. Feng Wu said seriously, Feng Sun and Xianyi are my friends. The white fairy asked, you mean the blue and the purple ones? Feng Wu nodded. Yup. The white fairy said, kiddo, you're still too young. I'm telling you, Where the seed of the spirit source is concerned, there are no friends. All there will be is betrayal and rivalry. Feng Wu frowned and stressed again. They're my friends. The white fairy said. If you say so. Feng Wu said they are. The white fairy wasn't going to argue with Feng Wu since she found it pointless. We'll see. She decided to let reality teach Feng Wu a lesson. Chapter 1782 Untitled. Chapter 1782 Untitled. All right. Let's wait and see, said Feng Wu. So where's your little lover? The white fairy glanced at Feng Wu. Why don't I see him anywhere? I'd like to see the two of you fighting over the seed of spirit source. Feng Wu glanced at the white fairy. The white fairy sounded confused. Is he afraid to come? Feng Wu took a deep breath. I know why he isn't here. The white fairy asked, why's that? Feng Wu said, you said it yourself. Spiritual kings aren't allowed to go near the tombs, nor can they take part in the competition for the seed of the spirit source. The white fairy said, that's right. Feng Wu said, that's why he isn't here. The white fairy finally understood what Feng Wu was getting at, but she didn't believe her. That's not possible. Feng Wu asked why. The white fairy said, from what you said, he isn't much older than you. Feng Wu said, he's 3 years older than me. The white fairy smirked. In that case, how can he possibly be a spiritual king? Kiddo, you're making things up. You think too highly of your little lover. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. In order not to let the white fairy see her as a love rival, Feng Wu couldn't tell the truth about her real relationship with Jun Linyuan. Moreover, she had to pretend that there was something between them. It was such a tiresome task. Feng Wu was about to say something when the white fairy waved her hand. Stop bragging. I'm not going to believe you. Feng Wu thought, suit yourself. You'll have to believe it once Jun Linyuan shows up. So where are the tombs? Feng Wu looked into the distance, but she couldn't see anything apart from the bleak grassland. It's not time yet, the white fairy said indifferently. The tombs will appear in about 5 minutes. Then, after some thought, the white fairy said, don't rush into the tombs. It won't do you any good. Feng Wu nodded. Now let's go, said the white fairy. When Feng Wu walked down the slope and headed for the crowd, Sapphira was talking behind her back. That Feng Wu is totally insane. She's so scary when she loses control. Look what she did to me. Sapphira held Ramil's hand and cried. Compared to the rude Sapphira, Ramil was like a real fairy. She was as elegant as a snowy lotus. She looked sympathetically at her crying sister, but she didn't make any rude comments. Infuriated, Feng Sun scolded Sapphira. Nonsense. Feng Wu isn't as capable as you. How could she have done this to you? Sapphira said. How am I supposed to know what happened to her? She improved quite a lot. She's no longer a level 3 spiritual elder. Feng Sun smirked. Sapphira knew that Jun Wuxia and Zhuoqingyu held a grudge against Feng Wu, so she said deliberately, Feng Wu is already a level 7 spiritual elder now. That was an astonishing announcement. Everyone was surprised. How is that possible? Everyone, Feng Sun included, cried out in disbelief. Jun Wuxia shrieked. Nonsense. Feng Wu was only a level 3 spiritual elder. Even if she made some wonderful discovery in the land of the spirit source, she should be a level 4 spiritual elder at most. How can she become a level 7 so suddenly? Chapter 1783, Untitled. Chapter 1783, Untitled. Zhuoqingyu's face darkened as well. Princess Sapphira, you can't make up something like that. There's no way that Feng Wu is a level 7 spiritual elder. The others nodded, agreeing with Jun Wuxia and Zhuoqingyu. Yes, it was impossible. No one could make such rapid improvement. Not only the teenagers, but also the adults shook their heads as well. That was too much. Sapphira smirked and thought, too much? Feng Wu really is a level 7 spiritual elder now. You'll see when she shows up. She was telling them now because this way, they would be intimidated when Feng Wu did show up. Then, everyone would feel the same way, and would handle her together. Feng Wu would become a common target. Sapphira hadn't told them that Master Teacher Si Baisi wanted to take Feng Wu as his disciple, but she turned him down. If they heard about that, they would lose their minds. They all shook their heads and wouldn't believe Sapphiro. 3 of them didn't actually care how capable Feng Wu was. The 3 people were the second prince, Zhuo Qingxian and Ranmil. The second prince's target had been Jun Linyuan the whole time, and no one else was worth his attention. Therefore, no matter how talented Feng Wu was, or how fast she had improved, as long as she wasn't as good as him, he wasn't bothered. Zhuo Qingxian was the genius teenager of the Zhuo family, and Zhuo Qingyu's older brother. He was the head of the younger generation of his family, and a good friend of the second prince. Both of them were very capable young men. The third was Ranmil, the purest princess of the grassland. Feng Wu showed up with a smile when the others were talking among themselves. "Are you talking about me?" She was as stunning as ever. Wow. Everyone involuntarily stopped talking when they saw the brilliant teenage girl. The next second, all eyes were on Feng Wu. "You, Feng Wu, your cultivation level." It wasn't that Feng Wu didn't want to hide her capability, but with the rise in her cultivation level, the jade that she had used to conceal herself no longer worked. Therefore, when Feng Wu stood in front of them, the more capable cultivators could immediately see her status. Chieftain Sinal's eyes widened. Emperor Wu narrowed his eyes. At first, they really thought that Sapphiro was making things up. After all, it was hard to believe that anyone could make 3 or 4 breakthroughs in a row. It was impossible. However, when Feng Wu stood in front of everyone, they could all see her true capability. Chieftain Sinal and Emperor Wu looked at each other. They both found it hard to believe. Chieftain Sinal smiled bitterly and cupped his fists at Emperor Wu. "Congratulations, Your Majesty. You found another unmatched genius." "Unmatched genius?" Someone broke the silence and asked, "What unmatched genius?" Chieftain Sinal looked at Feng Wu and chuckled. Princess Feng Wu was only a level 3 spiritual elder yesterday, but now, she's already a level 7 spiritual elder. I think that's enough to make her an unmatched genius. Only someone as capable as Chieftain Sinal could see that right away. Master Dugu, Master Zhua, and Lord Mu had an inkling, but they couldn't be sure at first. Chapter 1784, Untitled. Chapter 1784, Untitled. Your Majesty, Jun Wuxia looked like she had just been struck by lightning. Meanwhile, the look on Emperor Wu's face was rather indescribable. It was great that the Junhua Empire had another unmatched genius. But what if that genius was unruly and uncontrollable? How frustrating. But it was still good news. Emperor Wu nodded. "Feng Wu, how did you rise from a level 3 spiritual elder to level 7 in one day?" Those words sealed the final verdict. What? So it was true. Jun Wuxia looked like she had just been struck by lightning. She swayed and nearly fainted. Zhuo Qingyu stared at Feng Wu in disbelief. She clenched her fists in her sleeves, and blue veins popped up on the back of her hands. "Feng Wu, I always thought of you as my rival, but you're already beyond my reach," thought Zhuo Qingyu. Dugu Yamo, and even the others all stared at Feng Wu as well. Members of the Feng clan had the most complicated feelings toward the news. Feng Yanfeng was completely baffled. A level 7 spiritual elder. She had risen from a level 3 spiritual elder to level 7 in one day. How was that possible? That couldn't be. Had Feng Wu again become the genius that she had once been? And he had denied such a genius. Not only that, he also tried to remove her from the clan. Feng Yanfeng had never regretted his decision so much. He decided that he had to keep Feng Wu in the clan now, no matter the cost. He would never try to remove her from the clan again. Feng Yiran, Feng Sang, and Feng Lu all stood there utterly baffled. They didn't know how to react. Feng Yiran and Feng Lu looked at each other in bewilderment. They still remembered when they were in northern border city. Back then, Feng Wu wasn't even a spiritual master yet, but half a year later, she was already a level 7 spiritual elder. What about them? Feng Yiran was an intermediate spiritual grandmaster, but Feng Lu was even worse. She wasn't even a spiritual grandmaster yet. How frustrating. Feng Lu shook with rage, but she couldn't utter a word. Seeing the others finally acknowledge that Feng Wu was a level 7 spiritual elder, Sapphira was over the moon. Naturally, she didn't point it out so that the others could praise Feng Wu. She was only trying to make everyone jealous of Feng Wu and turn her into a target. Therefore, Feng Wu, why don't you tell us what opportunity you ran into? How did you make 3 breakthroughs in a row? Feng Wu glanced at Sapphira, slightly regretting not having cut off her tongue for good. Seeing Feng Wu keep silent, Sapphira was very pleased. Feng Wu, are you going to keep it a secret? That's true. No one would want to share such a great opportunity. Immediately, all eyes were on Feng Wu. Opportunity? What kind of opportunity would make Feng Wu improve so rapidly? Could she share it with other people? Everyone's gazes became even more intense. Feng Wu glanced at Sapphira and couldn't be bothered to reply since the White Fairy was telling her about the tombs, and she didn't want to miss a word. Chapter 1785 Untitled. Chapter 1785, Untitled. But Sapphira kept hopping round like an annoying bug. She glanced at Feng Wu and smirked. Feng Wu, you can't keep it a secret forever. Your biggest mistake is keeping me alive. Now I can tell everyone the truth. Everyone? Sapphira sneered at Feng Wu before turning to the others. Guess what? Feng Wu made such rapid progress because she betrayed all of you. Instantly. Whoosh. All eyes were on Sapphira. She had never been the center of attention before, so she smiled in satisfaction, glanced at Feng Wu and smirked. Because she sold the information of 5 of the people here to the White Ghost King. As a result, the White Ghost King raised her to a level 7 spiritual elder. Wow! She can do that. What information did she sell? How did she do it? It's true. The White Ghost King really is one of the 3 Ghost Kings. Seeing the others become excited, Sapphira smirked. Princess Feng Wu here sold the information of Ranmil, Zhuqingxian, the second prince, Xian Yi, and Feng Sun to the White Ghost King. Why them? Because they're all young spiritual lords. Only young and powerful souls like them are worth the White Ghost King's attention. Sapphira grew more excited as she spoke. So the 5 of you should be more careful. If something happens to you, Feng Wu is the one to blame. The White Fairy grinned at Feng Wu. Are you going to just stand there and let her ruin your reputation? Feng Wu asked. Do you think anyone will believe such a wild accusation? The White Fairy said. I think someone will. Feng Wu smiled. Those who trust me won't believe it no matter how I'm slandered. Those who don't will find some other excuse, even if Sapphira doesn't say anything. So, why should I explain myself to other people? The White Fairy looked at Feng Wu in surprise, agreeing with what she said. Feng Wu had left a good impression on the White Fairy, but that was about it. However, when the White Fairy saw how level-headed Feng Wu was, she began to respect her. Other girls would have burst into tears or fainted by now. Interesting. The White Fairy rubbed her chin and smiled. Bullshit. Hearing what Sapphira said, Feng Sun was the first to react. He charged out, trying to hit Sapphira. 2 of the older prince's secret guards stepped out and stopped him. Feng Sun then raised his leg to kick Sapphira. That's all bullshit. You're lying. Slander Xiao Wu again, and I'll kill you. The ferocious look in his eyes made Sapphira's stomach lurch. But Feng Sun wasn't Jun Linyuan, and he couldn't intimidate Sapphira the way the latter did. Sapphira took a few steps back and smirked at Feng Sun, who was struggling violently. Just wait and see. Soon, Feng Wu will get you killed. Feng Sun broke free and tried once more to hit Sapphira. Sapphira immediately gave up and tried to hide behind Chieftain Sinal. Chieftain Sinal smacked Sapphira on the head. Chapter 1786 Face Slapping, Act 1-1. Chapter 1786, Face Slapping, Act 1-1. He turned to Feng Sun and smiled. My daughter doesn't know what she's talking about. Young Lord Feng, please don't be mad. Everyone just ignore her. Don't take her too seriously. After all, even if Feng Wu can sell such information, she doesn't know the others that well. What can she possibly sell? Father, Sapphira stomped her foot. The chieftain had rendered all her efforts futile. Seeing that Chieftain Sinal was being relatively reasonable, Feng Sun didn't try to hit Sapphiro again. Feng Wu, how did you make such rapid progress? Since Chieftain Sinal had scolded his own daughter, Emperor Wu had to do something as well. Feng Wu smiled. I made breakthroughs. That was it. I broke through my bottleneck and moved on to the next level. Emperor Wu didn't know what to say. Jun Wuxia said, Feng Wu, you can't talk to His Majesty like that. Zhuo Qingyu said, Feng Wu, you made 3 breakthroughs in a row. Barely anyone has done that. You must be hiding something from us. Feng Wu shrugged. Is it that difficult to make 3 breakthroughs in a row? The others all nodded. Yes, it's very, very difficult. Feng Wu shrugged and said, but in the 6 months since I left Northern Border City, I rose from a level 1 spiritual master to a level 7 spiritual elder. During this time, I made 2, 3, and 4 breakthroughs in a row many times. I don't think it's all that difficult at all. Everyone immediately fell silent. Feng Wu's words rendered them all speechless. They had all forgotten one thing. Feng Wu's cultivation ability had been destroyed once, and she had restarted only after she returned to the imperial capital from Northern Border City. It was just as she said. Having more than 1 breakthrough at a time wasn't difficult for her at all. Everyone looked at one another, and none of them knew what to say. The second prince stared at Feng Wu with a gloomy look in his eyes. Just then there was a rumble. The ground shook violently. An ear-splitting thunderclap almost tore the sky open. Formidable spiritual essence gathered came at them from all directions. Tombs rose out of the ground. The tombs! The tombs have shown up. Our chance is here. Even if we can't obtain the seed of the spirit source, we'll still find a lot of opportunities among the tombs. Quickly, the door to the tombs is open. Based on my past experience, the door will only open for 10 seconds. It'll close after that. Let's go. Immediately, all the youngsters of the Zhenhua Empire and Sinal Grassland started running toward the tombs. Feng Wu wanted to move as well, but at that moment, a formidable power seemed to tie her down, and she couldn't even lift a finger. Who's doing this? Feng Wu asked the White Fairy. The White Fairy frowned. I'm searching. One moment. Feng Wu was furious. The things these people would do to stop her. She had almost reached the tombs, but they had used such a mean trick to keep her away. She wanted to move, but her shoes seemed stuck to the ground. Feng Wu thought that if her shoes were stuck, she could probably take them off and walk away on bare feet. But how was she going to take off her shoes when she couldn't lift a finger? Xiao Wu, Feng Sun and Xian Yi showed up on either side of her at that moment. Chapter 1787 Face Slapping, Act 1-2. Chapter 1787, Face Slapping, Act 1-2. Seeing that Feng Wu only stood there, they realized that something wasn't right. You guys go in first, Feng Wu said, still frozen to the spot. Xiao Wu. Feng Sun wanted to say something, but Feng Wu cut him off. Last 3 seconds. Feng Sun, the 2 of you should go in now. Feng Wu glared at Feng Sun. Are you going to do what I say or not? Feng Wu knew that if she told them that she had been tied to the spot by some trick, Feng Sun would never go in without her. But she didn't want him to miss all the great opportunities inside. Feng Sun studied Feng Wu's face. Trust me, Feng Wu said solemnly. Feng Sun searched his memory and realized that Feng Wu had always been able to turn things around. Nothing had ever been able to affect her. At that thought he nodded. We'll wait for you inside. Feng Sun and Xian Yi entered at the last second. But to Feng Wu's surprise, they weren't the last ones to go in. Instead, it was the second prince. He stood at the doorstep and looked into Feng Wu's eyes. There was a malicious smile on his gloomy face. Then the door closed. When the door shut completely, Feng Wu realized that the power tying her down had disappeared. She could move again. So it was him. The White Fairy smirked. Who is he? Feng Wu said, he's the second prince. The White Fairy said, that's actually quite impressive. At his young age, he has achieved level 3 in his confined space, and he's so gloomy. Interesting. Feng Wu rolled her eyes at the white fairy. This ghost king was such a carefree character. The door to the tombs was shut, and Feng Wu still didn't know what to do. Xiao Wu. The northern Feng general quickly walked up to her and held her hands, looking concerned. Xiao Wu, what happened? Why did your mind wander off? Feng Wu smiled wryly. She hadn't been absent-minded. She hadn't moved because the second prince's confined space had stopped her. However, she couldn't say that because she didn't have any evidence. Lady Northern Feng said sympathetically, Xiao Wu, the door is shut. I'm afraid you've lost the chance. Before Feng Wu could say anything, Mrs. Zhou chuckled. Why does it seem to me that Miss Feng Wu was simply too scared to go in? Mrs. Duga said. That's right. Everyone was rushing toward the door, and she was the only one who stood there. Empress Duga waved her hand. Miss Feng has risen to a level 7 spiritual elder, so she has already obtained what she needed on this trip to the land of the spirit source. The tombs aren't that important. Mrs. Zhou said, that's right. The tombs can be so dangerous. I can understand why Miss Feng was too afraid to go in. Hearing their words, the Empress Dowager, who was sitting on a soft cushioned chair a few steps away, snorted. There, I was thinking that she was quite impressive, but she's just a coward. Feng Wu had saved the Empress Dowager several times, and with her great performance so far, the Empress Dowager's attitude had begun to change. But now, seeing that Feng Wu didn't dare go near the tombs, the Empress Dowager was disappointed. Feng Wu didn't seem affected by what everyone said. Staring at Empress Dugu, she only said, the second prince is very good at his confined space. That was a bold statement. Chapter 1788 Face Slapping, Act 1-3. Chapter 1788. Face Slapping, Act 1-3. Empress Duga's face immediately darkened. Miss Feng Wu, what do you mean by that? Feng Wu smiled. The second prince's confined space comes in really handy at this moment. He can freeze in place whoever he doesn't want to see enter that door. That way the person will lose the only chance. Empress Duga's face turned livid. She had been trying very hard to keep up the second prince's good reputation, since she had great plans for him. But what Feng Wu said could ruin her son's reputation, so Empress Dugu was infuriated. She could no longer keep calm. Those words affected her greatly. Are you accusing the prince of stopping you and making you lose this chance? Do you have any proof of that? As one of Empress Duga's pawns, Mrs. Zhou stepped out and scolded Feng Wu. Feng Wu shrugged. Did I say that? Mrs. Zhou said. That's exactly what you said. Feng Wu smiled. It was just a suggestion. Mrs. Zhou said. You were too afraid to go in yourself, but you're blaming it on someone else. That's just ridiculous, saying that someone else stopped you. Feng Wu said. Why should I be afraid? If that's the case, why would I come here? Mrs. Zhou smirked. You're not afraid? Go in then. If you enter that door in front of everyone, I'll believe that the second prince did block you. Instantly, all eyes were on Feng Wu. Feng Wu gave them a half-smile. Are you all going to believe me if I do that? Mrs. Zhou said. Of course. Too bad for you. But you have no chance of getting in there at all. Feng Wu, you. But before Mrs. Zhou could finish, Feng Wu stepped out and headed for the door. Feng Wu stopped outside the door. Mrs. Zhou spoke in a sarcastic voice behind her. You missed the timing. Who on earth do you think you are? That door won't open just because you want it to open. Meanwhile, Feng Wu stood outside the door and talked to the white fairy, who was telling her how to get in. Open the door. I'm Feng Wu. Open the door. Feng Wu pretended to pound on the door to the tombs. Those sitting around outside the door were all speechless. How can she be so naive? Who the hell does she think she is? Why does she think that the door will open simply because she knocked on it? Ha ha ha, that's so funny. Feng Wu is so. Everyone from both the Zhenhua Empire and the Sinal grassland laughed loudly. Chieftain Sinal couldn't keep his mouth closed. Your Majesty, Princess Feng Wu is so funny. But Emperor Wu didn't find it funny at all. He was being laughed at, and that was very humiliating. His face turned livid, and he stared at Feng Wu with a ferocious look in his eyes. The humiliation was unbearable. I wanted to go in, but the second prince stopped me. I couldn't move and missed the opportunity. He's the one you should blame. Open the door. Feng Wu jumped around as she pounded on the door. Empress Dugu was furious. Damn her. Damn her. This abominable girl. She was trying to ruin the second prince's reputation in front of so many people. Chapter 1789 Face Slapping, Act 1-4. Chapter 1789, Face Slapping, Act 1-4. Building a good reputation was very difficult, and it would only take a small matter to destroy it. Empress Dugu finally knew why Feng Wu had walked toward the tombs just then. She can't go in, so she's going to ruin my son, thought the Empress. Take her down for M-. But, before she could finish, crack. The door had been tightly shut a moment ago. But now, the bronze door slowly opened. Everyone watched in disbelief. The door is open. The door to the tombs has opened. Is it because Feng Wu knocked on it? Because Feng Wu said that the second prince stopped her, so the door opened for her. Is that it? Mrs. Zhua and Empress Dugu's eyes widened, and the muscles on their faces twitched. They couldn't stop trembling. How was that even possible? How? Why did the door open? Feng Wu walked in and looked over her shoulder at Empress Dugu. The smirk on her face looked just like the one on the second prince's face earlier. Empress Dugu was baffled. The rest of the crowd was equally silent. The look gave Mrs. Zhua the creeps, and she almost forgot where she was. However, she soon returned to herself and shouted, "It wasn't the prince. The prince definitely didn't use confined space on Feng Wu." The crowd was speechless. She shouldn't have brought that up. Now that she had, everyone was reminded of the accusation. Those that didn't believe it before also began to form their own ideas. People could tell right from wrong. Mrs. Zhua didn't know what to say. Empress Dugu was speechless. After what Feng Wu said, even if the second prince was innocent, he didn't seem so anymore. Although Feng Wu didn't have any evidence, Empress Dugu couldn't blame her for anything either. Feng Wu could only imagine the looks on everyone else's faces when she walked through that door. The thought of the looks on Empress Dugu and Mrs. Zhua's faces made her want to laugh. She then gave the white fairy the thumbs up. "I'm so glad you're with me. Thanks." The white fairy said proudly, "I used to live here and only left because it was too boring. But even though I live somewhere else now, I still have the key to my door. This prince has practically dug his own grave." Feng Wu chuckled. He has no idea that he's become the topic of the day now. I bet he's very satisfied right now. The white fairy felt speechless. This is my home. Some outsider comes here to steal from my house and tries to lock me outside? Is he an idiot? Feng Wu laughed. He's going to pay for this. The white fairy wasn't exactly a forgiving person. Feng Wu chuckled. Hey, you haven't told me where the other two ghost kings are yet. How dumb are you? The white fairy gave her a "you idiot" look. Feng Wu looked perplexed. The white fairy looked her up and down and said in resignation, "Do you know what level you are at right now?" Feng Wu said, "I'm a level 7 spiritual elder." The white fairy snorted. "So you do remember." Feng Wu rubbed her nose and said, "I've always had good self-awareness." The white fairy almost laughed. "If you're so self-aware, why don't you realize that it's next to impossible for you to defeat them?" Chapter 1790 Face Slapping, Act 1-5. Chapter 1790, Face Slapping, Act 1-5. Feng Wu said sincerely, "I have you, don't I?" The white fairy couldn't believe her ears. "There's one of me and two of them. Plus, they're twin brothers. When they join hands, they're even more capable. Why are you so sure I can defeat them?" Feng Wu asked. "Can't we reason with them?" The white fairy said sarcastically, "Please don't tell me that you think I'm on friendly terms with them." Feng Wu asked, "You're not?" The white fairy wanted to jab a finger in her head. "Use your brain. If they're my friends, why would I abandon a nice, big house like this to go live in a cave?" Feng Wu cleared her throat. The exasperated look on the white fairy's face suddenly made her want to laugh. The white fairy puffed out her cheeks and glowered at Feng Wu, and Feng Wu had to work very hard to fight back her laughter. Stop laughing. The white fairy rolled her eyes. Sure, there are a lot of treasures hidden among the tombs, but this place is riddled with danger. Why are you laughing? Aren't you worried at all? Seeing the way the white fairy rested her hands on her hips and sulked, Feng Wu burst out laughing. This posture simply didn't match her fairy-like appearance at all. Who would have thought that she used to be a princess of a past dynasty? The white fairy's face darkened, and she glared at Feng Wu. Stop it. Feng Wu immediately waved her hands. Alright, I'll stop. Ha 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 ha. The white fairy said. Do you want to say bye-bye to the treasures and opportunities? Feng Wu immediately surrendered. The white fairy glanced at her and snorted. Feng Wu pleaded. Dear fairy, please help me. Please. The white fairy glanced at Feng Wu, but didn't say a word. Feng Wu tugged at her sleeve. Dear fairy, if I get to meet Chu Tianxiao again, I'll tell him how pretty, gentle, and kind you are. Fine. Stop talking already. The white fairy might sound impatient, but Feng Wu could tell that she was very happy. So what should we do first? Feng Wu smiled at the white fairy. The white fairy asked, What do you want to do? What do I want? Tilting her head, Feng Wu gave it some thought and said, Of course, I want to improve our capability first. Me, you little phoenix, the cub, the fallen star sword. The white fairy nodded. That's a good idea, but... Feng Wu kept her gaze on the white fairy. But what? The white fairy said proudly. But I'm the only one who can help you. Feng Wu let out a breath of relief. Thank you, dear fairy. The white fairy glanced at Feng Wu. Feng Wu immediately said, If I meet Chu Fengxiao again, I'll say something nice about you. The white fairy snorted. You sound as if I need your praise. Feng Wu immediately said, But other people need to know your good deeds. Whether or not you need it, I'm still going to do it. That sounds more like it. The white fairy glanced at Feng Wu again. She began to like the way this girl talked and behaved. Chapter 1791 Face Slapping, Act 2-1. Chapter 1791. Face Slapping, Act 2-1. The white fairy thought, since I've decided to help her, I might as well finish the job. Brother Chu likes kind girls. He'll be very happy when he hears about what I did. Meanwhile, Feng Wu had walked a few hundred meters into the main hall. This used to be a pristine place, but it was now in a mess. There were large holes in the floor. Sculptures had been knocked over, and broken puppets were scattered all over the ground. Looking around, Feng Wu didn't see anything worth taking, and was very disappointed. Just then, someone walked in her direction, and was surprised to see Feng Wu. It was none other than Sapphiro. Her eyes widened when she saw Feng Wu. How did you get in here? Feng Wu shrugged. The door opened and here I am. Sapphiro said, Bullshit. Feng Wu said, Whatever you say. Sapphiro glared at Feng Wu, then smirked. I don't care how you got in. We've collected all the good stuff along the way. Do you see the sword in my hand? It's a level 3 weapon, and other people have found even better things. You've found nothing so far, and you won't find anything. After that, Sapphiro picked up a scabbard and ran off. Feng Wu didn't know what to say. The white fairy smirked. Those who entered first were very relentless. I see that they ran into the poisonous corpses. Feng Wu asked, Can I find good stuff among them? The white fairy asked, What do you mean by good stuff? You can't seriously think that the level 3 weapon which the princess has is a treasure, can you? Feng Wu said, A level 3 weapon is a suitable weapon for a spiritual elder. It's not all that useless, is it? The white fairy's lips twitched. If you want that kind of stuff, I can find you a whole stack in no time. But they'll be too heavy for you to carry. Feng Wu's eyes lit up. Seeing that Feng Wu was excited over such petty things, the white fairy rolled her eyes. What's with your taste? You're embarrassing Chu Tianxiao. Feng Wu said, I'm only a spiritual elder now. You can't expect me to see things like a spiritual king. The white fairy agreed. Since you're interested in spiritual elder stuff, would you like some broken sword spirits? The sword spirit of your fallen star sword can digest them all. Your sword spirit is the dumbest sword spirit I've ever seen. Feng Wu cleared her throat uneasily. Feng Wu knew how capable the white fairy was. Although she wasn't as good as Master Teacher Seabassy, she was still one of the top cultivators on this continent. That was why weapons for spiritual elders were worthless in her eyes. But Feng Wu was only a spiritual elder now, and those weapons were very suitable for her. She didn't mind having a few more pieces. Come, let's go find some broken sword spirits. Feng Wu had forged the Fallen Star sword herself. It had started off as a level 5 weapon, and was now a level 3. A weapon which could make advancements on its own was extremely rare. The White Fairy would love to have a rival at her level. These weaklings are drooling over level 3 weapons. How naive. What kind of world is this? Thought the fairy. 100 meters up ahead. Chapter 1792 Face Slapping, Act 2-2. Chapter 1792, Face Slapping, Act 2-2. Turn right. You'll see a door. There are numbers above the door. The password is 123456. Feng Wu found that password a bit too simple. Aren't you afraid that other people will guess it? Feng Wu asked casually. The White Fairy said, the simpler ones are harder to guess. No one has ever guessed it after all these years. Feng Wu rubbed her nose. All right. Just then she heard someone talking not far away. This is the right direction. We'll follow the second prince. The prince definitely has a map. Following him has to be the right choice. Yes, that's right. After that, nearly everyone followed the second prince and walked in another direction. Feng Wu watched the scene from her hiding place. They've gone that way, Feng Wu murmured to the White Fairy. The White Fairy glanced at Feng Wu. Do you want to follow them? Feng Wu said, of course not. I'll go wherever you tell me to go. The White Fairy glanced at Feng Wu. Do you know where the prince is taking them? Feng Wu asked curiously, where? The White Fairy smirked. They are heading right for the lair of the Ghost King of the Netherworld. This is going to be interesting. The White Fairy spoke before Feng Wu could ask. Let's go. Our priority is to improve your ability. Feng Wu nodded and opened the door to the secret room. Close the door, the White Fairy whispered. Feng Wu nodded and quickly closed the door. She turned around to find a room filled with brilliant golden light and dense spiritual essence. The room was vast and empty. It was only about 100 square meters in size, but the dense spiritual essence caught Feng Wu's attention. These are bullywood racks stood along the walls on both sides. Each rack had 3 shelves, each containing different weapons. After countless years, the racks all looked worn and dilapidated. Although there were many weapons on the shelves, Feng Wu frowned when she picked up a weapon. The blade is chipped. This one too. There are 3 gaps in it. This spear is broken. And this. The more weapons Feng Wu checked, the more disappointed she became. She then turned to the White Fairy, who was standing next to her. Because the White Fairy was in her soul form, only Feng Wu could see her. The White Fairy glanced at Feng Wu. According to your definition, these are all level 3 weapons. Feng Wu nodded. That was true. Do you find these weapons useless? The White Fairy asked casually. Feng Wu gave it some thought and said, these are all wonderful materials. If I can take them away with me, I can sell them at a good price. After I refine them, I think I can rebuild some level 3 weapons. The White Fairy said grumpily, why do you bother with this garbage? Feng Wu smiled wryly. The White Fairy had simply seen too much. These broken weapons would be very popular in the outside world. Just let the sword spirit of the Fallen Star sword eat them all, the White Fairy said proudly. Chapter 1793 Face Slapping, Act 2-3. Chapter 1793. Face Slapping, Act 2-3. Feng Wu asked, can she do that now? She can devour these things now. So many of them? The White Fairy gave Feng Wu a you idiot look. Feng Wu didn't seem convinced. The White Fairy stared at her. Do you think so little of me? Feng Wu looked perplexed. The White Fairy said, your little sword spirit was so dumb at first. She knew and understood next to nothing. After what I taught her, she's very clever now. Feng Wu looked amazed. Really? The White Fairy snorted. Of course it's true. Why should I lie to you? Come out now. The white fairy gave the order and a girl dressed in red and with two symmetrical ponytails jumped out of the fallen star sword. She didn't seem to have mastered flying yet and fell to the ground as soon as she was out of the sword. Fengwu looked away in embarrassment. Humiliated, the white fairy wanted to scold the girl, but managed to fight back her temper. She pointed at the girl and said grumpily, "Go absorb them all." The little girl was only about 2 or 3 years old. Her plump cheeks reminded one of a red apple, and her pretty eyes had the most innocent look in them. Her reaction was a little slow. Sitting there in bewilderment, she looked up at the white fairy. About 3 seconds later, she finally realized what had happened. Wah! She burst into tears. The white fairy stared at the girl and was on the verge of losing her temper. "Stop crying. I've been teaching you how to fly forever, and you were doing perfectly fine in the sword. Why can't you do it now? And you even fell to the ground. Stop crying." The girl looked at the white fairy with her teary eyes, and 3 seconds later, she finally returned to herself. Wah! The girl cried even more loudly, and her voice was ear-splitting. It was a good thing Fengwu had closed the door. Otherwise, everyone would have heard them by now. The white fairy felt so humiliated. When she saw the smile which Fengwu was trying to fight back, she was so frustrated that her face went scarlet red. Fengwu couldn't hold it in anymore, and she burst out laughing. The proud white fairy looked so helpless when she was around the 2-year-old. Seeing the childish side of the fairy, Fengwu found her quite adorable. Don't tell her off. She's only a 2-year-old, and she knows nothing but sleeping, eating and crying. What do you expect? Fengwu stopped the fairy and said, "You'll drive yourself crazy, getting angry over such a little girl. Be patient. She'll listen to you in the end." The white fairy snorted and stared at the little girl who had humiliated her. "Go eat the broken sword spirits. Now." The little girl still had tears on her cheeks and looked most adorable. Biting her lower lip, she nodded and inched toward the broken weapons. She was still stumbling when she walked, but when she picked up a broken sword, her eyes lit up. The next second she stuffed it into her mouth. Chapter 1794 Face Slapping, Act 2-4. Chapter 1794 Face Slapping, Act 2-4. Fengwu was shocked. How could such a sharp blade fit into her little mouth? But before Fengwu could say anything, the little girl had already started chewing. Level 3 weapons were valuable pieces in the outside world. Otherwise, Sapphira wouldn't have been so happy when she found that weapon. But the little sword spirit was chewing on one at the moment, albeit a broken one. Crack! It never occurred to Fengwu that the little girl could have such sharp teeth. She chewed on the broken blade, as if it was just a sugarcane stick, and finished it in less than a minute. Fengwu didn't know what to say. "This is the weapon recycling warehouse," said the white fairy. "Although the weapons aren't intact, they work the same to replenish the spiritual essence." Fengwu nodded. Her eyes were fixed on the little sword spirit the entire time. After finishing the sword, the little sword spirit turned around to fetch a second weapon, which was a spear that had been snapped in half. Crack! She seemed to enjoy it a lot. Fengwu could see that the entire fallen star sword was covered by a pale blue glow. As the little sword spirit ate, the blue color became deeper and deeper. The white fairy said, "The pale blue means that the sword is still at level 3. When it turns from deep blue to light green, it will become a level 2 weapon." Fengwu asked in surprise, "Are you saying that the fallen star sword can level up?" The white fairy rolled her eyes at Fengwu. "Why else would I bring you here? To play with you?" Fengwu wasn't affected by her arrogant tone at all, and she asked with a smile, "So the fallen star sword can become a level 2 weapon?" The white fairy glanced at her before she looked away. Fengwu asked, "Can it?" The white fairy wanted to smack Fengwu on the head, but she controlled herself in the end. "Just wait and see." Crack! The sound of the little sword spirit chewing on the metal went on and on. Fengwu had thought that she would be full after eating 2 or 3 pieces, but to her surprise, the sword spirit was still eating after finishing 5 pieces. Is she going to be all right? Feng Wu asked the White Fairy. The White Fairy looked up at the ceiling and wouldn't talk to Feng Wu. Alright. Feng Wu turned to check the fallen star sword itself. She held it in her hands. The 1-meter sword turned a deeper shade of blue until it was very dark. Because the sword had a spiritual connection with Feng Wu, she could clearly sense the transformation. 70%, 80%, 85%, 90%. Although level 3 and level 2 weapons were only one level apart, there was a great difference in their capabilities, which was reflected in their prices. The price of a level 2 weapon was 5 times that of a level 3. Feng Wu calculated the price of a level 3 weapon in spiritual stones. A level 3 weapon in perfect condition would cost her 10,000 low-grade spiritual stones. Chapter 1795 Face Slapping, Act 2-5. Chapter 1795 Face Slapping, Act 2-5. If the fallen star sword could become a level 2 weapon, it would be worth 50,000 low-grade spiritual stones. Feng Wu looked at the White Fairy in excitement. I can tell that it's 95% ready. A little more spiritual essence, and it will probably rise to level 2. The White Fairy nodded but didn't seem all that interested. Feng Wu added, level 2 weapons are 5 times more valuable than level 3 ones. The fallen star sword will be worth 50,000 low-grade spiritual stones once it levels up. Back when Feng Wu had little money, even a low-grade spiritual stone was very precious to her. The White Fairy rolled her eyes at Feng Wu, but didn't say a word. As one of the most powerful cultivators on this continent, she had seen and experienced a lot more than Feng Wu had. Feng Wu had no idea what was going on in the White Fairy's head. All she knew was that level weapons were very hard to come by. And the second prince was holding such a piece right now. 97%, 98%, 99%. Feng Wu clenched her fists in excitement and stared at the little girl with her clear, bright eyes. Crack! When the fallen star sword reached 99%, the little sword spirit suddenly stopped. Feng Wu's eyes widened. Don't stop. Eat a bit more. You're almost there. The sword spirit rubbed her belly and found it rather plump. Tilting her head, she gave it some thought before she went on chewing on more weapons. Feng Wu let out a breath of relief. The next second, ding! She heard a pleasant ring. Finally, her weapon had risen to level 2. Feng Wu smiled at the White Fairy and said happily, it has leveled up. It's a level 2 weapon now. The fallen star sword wasn't something she had picked up from the ground. She had found the stones herself and made it from scratch. It had a lot of sentimental value. Seeing the fallen star sword getting stronger was like seeing her child grow up. Other people wouldn't understand such a sense of fulfillment. The sincere and bright smile on Feng Wu's face moved the White Fairy as well. It's only a level 2 weapon. Why are you so happy? The White Fairy said grumpily. We still have a very long way to go. Feng Wu wasn't convinced. Weapons don't level up like cultivators do. Its level won't rise that fast. A master weaponsmith told me. The White Fairy waved her hands. The sword spirit I train won't be the same as others. Just wait and see. The White Fairy was very confident and very proud. Feng Wu didn't seem convinced. The White Fairy's eyes flickered. The tombs are only open to outsiders for a limited time. We're wasting our time here. Wasting their time. Feng Wu smiled wryly. But the fallen star sword is already improving. The White Fairy said grumpily. Yes, it is. But what about you? Feng Wu didn't know what to say. She shook her head. The White Fairy rolled her eyes at Feng Wu. There you go. You're still so weak now. Don't you want to use this opportunity to improve yourself? So weak. Feng Wu smiled bitterly. Actually, she had already been making very fast improvements in the past few days. Chapter 1796 Face Slapping, Act 3-1. Chapter 1796 Face Slapping, Act 3-1. She had risen from a level 4 spiritual elder to a level 7 in one go. To anyone else, that was very rapid advancement. Earlier outside the door to the tombs, so many people had been shocked by her efficiency. The White Fairy said. Your advancement was too fast, and your foundation is too weak. Right now, your top priority is to train yourself and bolster your dantian. Otherwise, when you have the seed of the spirit source, your body won't be able to withstand any training before it collapses. She was right, and Fengwu agreed with her. And, come with me. The White Fairy gestured with her hand. Enhancing your physical strength and dantian may be difficult for other people. But here among the tombs, I just happen to know a place that can help you. The White Fairy used to live here, and knew the place like the back of her hand. She could walk around easily even with her eyes closed. The place was full of halls and crisscrossing roads, and it was very easy to get lost. One might never find their way back. But with the White Fairy around, Fengwu had a huge advantage. The White Fairy led the way, and Fengwu followed her. The fairy told Fengwu as they walked, those people only ever see just part of this place, and have no idea what the real treasures are. Fengwu chatted with her. I'd love to hear about that. The White Fairy had been a ghost for so long. Now that she finally met Fengwu, she couldn't stop talking. She said, there's a side room about 50 meters ahead of you on your left. It may look like a dilapidated side room to you, but it contains a lot of materials for cultivation. It's the resuscitation pool for netherworld ghosts, and it's not something I'd tell anyone about. Fengwu's eyes lit up. Cultivation materials? The White Fairy said grumpily, forget it. Those things are suitable for those below the spiritual elder stage. You're already a spiritual elder now. They're useless to you. Fengwu wished that Qiuling and Chaoge were here. They would have made very good use of the materials. The White Fairy shrugged. She had no idea who Qiuling and Chaoge were. But any cultivator below the spiritual elder stage was negligible to her. Rumble. Just then Fengwu heard some voices. Wait, said Fengwu. I hear someone quarreling up ahead. The White Fairy frowned. You don't seem to be the meddlesome type. Fengwu smiled bitterly. That's right, I'm not. But I think I heard some familiar voices. The White Fairy said. So what? Your top priority now is to improve yourself. Fengwu shook her head. This place is full of danger, and people can be killed so easily. I can't just stand by and do nothing. The White Fairy stared at Fengwu. Fengwu looked back at her. Are you sure you want to go? The White Fairy frowned. Fengwu nodded solemnly. The White Fairy said in resignation, let's go then. Fengwu asked, are you not mad? The White Fairy rolled her eyes. You look like a reasonable girl, but once you make up your mind, no one can change it. Am I right? I'd rather you deal with this business quickly than waste your time here. Fengwu beamed at her. Chapter 1797 Face Slapping, Act 3-2. Chapter 1797. Face Slapping, Act 3-2. Although the White Fairy was grumpy and had a vicious tongue, she understood Fengwu very well. Sure. Fengwu picked up her pace. She seemed to recognize Qiuling's voice earlier, but she didn't think she saw Qiuling enter this place. Therefore she had to make sure. When she walked past a hall and turned a corner, what she saw infuriated her. Ha ha ha. Do you have a death wish? How dare you insult me? That was Jun Wuxia's voice. Fengwu frowned a little. Who was Jun Wuxia shouting at? Qiuling, are you not afraid of death? After that, Fengwu heard Zhuo Qingyu's voice. Qiuling. Fengwu's eyes lit up when she heard the name. So she was right. It was indeed Qiuling. Jun Wuxia, Zhuo Qingyu and Qiuling. Fengwu immediately realized what was going on. They were bullying Qiuling. As expected, Jun Wuxia then said, Qiuling, we're not asking you to do something impossible. Why is it so difficult for you to insult Fengwu? Zhuo Qingyu smirked. Say a bad word about Fengwu, and we'll probably spare your life. Otherwise, Qiuling said. My mistress is the best. I'll never say a bad word about her. What a tough girl. Jun Wuxia smirked. Your attitude will come at a price. Zhuo Qingyu smirked as well. Crack. There came the sound of a joint being dislocated. Arg! Qiuling cried out in pain, and cold sweat rolled down her face. Weren't you so tough a moment ago? Why are you crying now? Jun Wuxia smirked. Say it. Say Feng Wu is a bitch, and I'll let you live. Zhua Qingyu broke Qiuling's kneecaps, forcing her to kneel. Thump. Qiuling fell to the ground with a thump. Arg! Qiuling screamed again. Still no. Are you that stubborn? Fine. Zhua Qingyu picked Qiuling up by her throat and was going to break her neck. Feng Wu arrived at that moment, and she was ready to charge at Zhua Qingyu. The white fairy said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Feng Wu turned around and stared at the white fairy. The white fairy said seriously, You'll expose yourself, and your enemy won't waste this great opportunity to kill you. She's just a servant, and her life is worthless. How can she be more important than your life and your future? The white fairy couldn't understand Feng Wu's choice. Back then, the white fairy herself was a respected and beloved princess. Countless servants used to work for her, and she never cared for any of them. Feng Wu stared at the white fairy. The white fairy was confused and infuriated by Feng Wu's defiance. Feng Wu smirked. She might be worthless to you, but to me. The white fairy was ready for a speech, saying that all lives were equal, and she had even prepared her retort. However, what Feng Wu said was, You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.